The Wilmington Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, June 7th, 2023 is called to order. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Attorney, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Madam Chair.
All right. All matters requiring commission action shall be presented to the Planning Commission by the planning staff and the applicant. In situations where planning staff is the applicant, there will be only one presentation. City staff will make the first presentation. The applicant will make the second presentation. Each presentation is limited to 5 minutes. The chair, at their discretion, may extend these time periods. To maintain an orderly meeting, all presentations shall proceed without interruption unless the commission desires to intervene with questions or comments. The chair will open the public hearing for those physically present wishing to speak about an item. Those in favor of an item shall be heard first, followed by those opposed. A 10-minute time will be allowed for public comment in favor of an item. A 10-minute time will be allowed for public comment in opposition to an item. A staff member will track the 10-minute time periods. Who's our timekeeper tonight? Do we have our staff timekeeper? Ms. Painter, thank you. Ms. Painter will track the 10-minute time periods and notify the speaker at the 5-minute mark, the 1-minute mark, and verbally call time when it expires. The chair, in their discretion, may extend these time periods. All groups, organizations, neighborhoods, or similar associations desiring to comment are asked to appoint one spokesperson to present their concerns or point of view to the commission on each agenda item. The public has been encouraged to submit their comments in writing via a web-based form located on the City of Wilmington's website. All comments received prior to 3 p.m. today were forwarded unedited to the Planning Commission. All comments received will be delivered to City Council when the item advances. All comments received will be made available to the public if requested. All votes will be voice votes after proper motions are made and consistency statements read into the record. The chair will state the outcome of the vote and the action. Rezoning requests that receive an unfavorable recommendation from the Planning Commission may be appealed by the applicant to the Wilmington City Council. Appeals should be in the form of a letter submitted to the city clerk within 10 days of this hearing. Any items being appealed will tentatively be heard at the second City Council meeting in the following month. This will be July 18th, 2023. And please note, the next Planning Commission meeting is not the first Wednesday of July, it is July 12th. Commissioners, the minutes were in your packet for May 2nd, 2023. Do we have any revisions, comments? Or a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Woodruff?
I'll second.
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, the minutes for May 2nd, 2023 are approved. All right, agenda item number 1 is a general rezoning, and the applicant has requested withdrawal. Is there any presentation or anything for this one?
Madam Chair, there is not a presentation. This was continued from your last meeting. The applicant has requested a withdrawal of this item, and it will be replaced with the next item on your agenda.
All right.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the withdrawal.
Great. Commissioner Lennon, seconded by Commissioner Goins, voted that the applicant that we withdraw the application for item number 1. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I don't know why my microphone seems to be a little off tonight, Brian. But I guess it's okay right now. All right, new business. Agenda item number 2 is a conditional district rezoning of properties containing 21.44 acres located at 3743 Independence Boulevard from O&I CD, Office and Institutional Conditional District, and MD 17 CD, High Density Multiple Dwelling Residential Conditional District, to RB CD, Regional Business District Conditional District, for a master planned development. And Mr. Harris is here for our staff presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chairwoman, I'll be presenting item number 2, conditional rezoning of 3743 Independence Boulevard. This image shows the site in the context of the surrounding area. The site is located at the corner of Independence Boulevard and Gallery Park Boulevard. It's approximately 21.44 acres as part of the Barclay West Master Plan and is currently vacant. These pictures show the existing conditions of the subject property. And these are the photos of the adjacent properties to the subject property. It's a map of the existing zoning and land uses for the site and adjacent properties. Subject property is currently conditionally zoned for O&I Office and Institutional, MD 17, High Density Multiple Dwelling Residential. That applicant proposes to rezone the subject property to RB CD, or Regional Business Conditional District. This is the current Barclay West Master Plan. On August 6, 2013, City Council rezoned a large-scale mixed-use development, Barclay West, that includes the subject property from PD plan development to the conditional districts of O&I 1, Office Institutional District 1, RB Regional Business, and multifamily medium density. On May 19, 2015, a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, was approved to clarify the conditions applied to the mixed-use development master plan. This is the proposed master plan update that is allowed in lieu of a site plan. The proposed master plan identifies future connectivity and the exclusion of some uses not compatible with the existing uses of Barclay West. While staff generally supports the list of uses included, staff has concerns with allowing vehicle renting and vehicle sales, as these uses typically include large, expansive parking lots for vehicle inventory that are not conducive to the walkable, pedestrian-friendly, mixed-use center that the comprehensive plan identifies for this area and to which Barclay West has become. This concern would be alleviated with establishment of a cap on the number of inventory spaces that would be permitted with such uses. The comprehensive plan identifies the site as within a mixed-use center and a greenfield site mixed-use place area of opportunity. Comprehensive plan calls for commercial centers that include a rich mix of uses, active pedestrian streetscapes, and strong connections to adjacent areas. Barclay West Master Plan development currently includes a mix of compatible uses consistent with comprehensive plan growth strategies identified for this area. These uses include retail, restaurants, hotel, movie theater, and residential apartments. The proposed conditional rezoning to RBCD is consistent with the recommendations of the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. The proposed conditional rezoning requests to RBCD at this location does adequately ensure the development of this property will be compatible with adopted plans and the existing development pattern, and staff recommends approval. This concludes staff presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Are there any questions for staff? Commissioner Woodruff?
Just real quick, obviously this was before us, and a lot of it had to do with the uses, and we now have this list. And I'm just curious, is this list what staff proposed? Is it what the applicant proposed, or is it a joint meeting of the minds?
This would be a joint meeting of minds.
Okay. In the basis for staff recommendation, there was a statement by staff that staff has concerns with allowing vehicle renting and vehicle sales, and it goes on to explain why. I don't see that in the prohibited use. Is that accurate?
It is not prohibited, but in a conditional district, we could conditionally cap that Our concern is just to have an expansive parking lot is not what we're thinking is in line with what Barclay West has come to at this point.
When you say staff could condition it, is that something you could do in the future, or is that something that would need to be done now?
We would like to do it now.
Okay. So you don't have a problem then with the vehicle renting and vehicle sales, but you would like to see some kind of limitation?
Yes, sir.
Do you have that defined for us as to what that would be?
We would like to recommend a cap of 50 parking spaces. This is in line with like Land Rover, Audi dealerships. Their approved site plans had 50 parking spaces.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Is that a follow-up to that one or something new? Okay. Commissioner Lennon?
Parking spaces or display spaces? Because in a car lot, which is which?
These would be inventory spaces.
Inventory spaces. But would it include the parking for the
It would
dealership?
not. It would be, you would park the facility based on the parking requirements of the code, and then in addition to that would be any inventory associated with the use.
Okay.
And the limit would be on just the inventory spaces.
Just because I'm wondering, do the cars inside the building count?
No, sir.
Okay, thanks.
So to run with that a little bit, maybe too far into the weeds, but how is that enforced? It's a shared parking situation in that mixed-use development. So are they marked? How do you enforce? If there was a cap on the inventory spaces, how do you know if they're following it or not with the shared parking situation?
It would have to get approved through TRC for the site plan. So at that point, we would be counting spaces for inventory.
The total number for the whole site?
For, if there's a dealership there, it would be for that specific dealership, yes.
Okay. Commissioner Adams?
A couple questions. It looks like there's a pretty sizable percentage of the site that's stormwater that I'm guessing is regional. What happens to that? Because it looks to be included in the footprint of the rezoning request.
I'm not sure I understand your question, Mr. Adams. What do you
There's an
mean?
existing stormwater
Yes,
pond.
yes.
Does that have to remain, or is that also subject to any kind of redevelopment? Because it looks like it's not part of an HOA or a separate parcel. Did you talk about stormwater, and if it is a regional functioning body with the other properties around it, how is that affected by this rezoning?
Commissioner Adams, that is the regional pond serving the entirety of Barclay West. It's not a specific use identified, but it is a facility that serves that entire property, and it would be subject to the Property Owners Association that would be managing that permit. So it would basically be required to stay in place to serve the properties that it's currently serving.
Okay. I had one other question. Can you remind us or recap what are the allowable uses that didn't wind up in the exclusion list for the RB?
I would have to pull those forward, but the only ones that we were concerned with were the ones that we discussed and felt with the applicant we could prohibit.
And I know that there's already been just sort of talk about parking here. If I read some of the recommended conditions where it talks about site planning principles, item number 10 is still trying to place parking behind or beside buildings. That would be, again, a condition, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Lennon?
So this is zone, excuse me, O and I currently. So this might be a question for the applicant, but I got to envision that if they built an office building, there'd be a pretty big parking lot. So I'm just curious why the distinction between an office parking lot and a sales operation.
I think I'd like to have the applicant respond to that.
Okay. Well, fair enough, but I'm more concerned about, or not concerned, but I'm more curious about where the city's coming from on, if I build an office building, I gotta park cars, right? what's the difference between that and a car lot? Assuming that my parking lot tree requirements are the same.
I think that I would look at that as one as being the parking space are part of the use for the office building. These are people going in and out of the, and what we're talking about is an inventory of cars just sitting there. Now, if it's a good distinction on it, but, one's a practical use for, what's needed for that building for the offices, and the other is, just inventory to sell.
But would you say there's more impervious surface or less with an office versus a car dealership?
I am not able to answer that question, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Lennon, if I may, I think one difference is that when we talk about other uses, and I'm going to let Mr. Chambers correct me if I'm wrong on this, we have a maximum parking requirement for those uses. So there's a cap. If you're doing an office building, there's a maximum number of spaces you're allowed to have with that. What we're talking about here is that you would have the maximum that would apply to the building for the dealership or the rental agency itself, but there would be absolutely no cap on the number of inventory spaces. And so if you think about it that way with the office, there is a limit on how much you could have for parking and impervious cover, whereas when you're talking about a rental or a dealership and inventory, we don't have anything in the code that limits the number of spaces.
Okay for now.
Everybody else okay for now? Commissioner Kofer?
Thank you, Mr. Harris. My only question would be, under the conditions number 13, on the window placement and the percentage of windows on the first floor, and then the 30-foot linear span of the blank facade. And the applicant can probably speak to this, but was that something you guys worked out together and that they were pleased with?
It was what we agreed on, yes, sir.
Okay, that was it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Harris. And the applicant's here?
Thank you, and good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Matt Nichols. I'm here this evening representing the applicant and owner, Cameron Properties Land Company, and with me this evening is Hill Rogers with Cameron Management, and we have a brief presentation I think will help explain the request and certainly try to answer any questions the Commission has. I know that the Commission's familiar with Barclay West. This is looking sort of southeast. You can see Independence in the bottom of the picture, and the subject property is identified with the yellow star. Just by way of background, Barclay West was approved as about a 301-acre rezoning by City Council. It's sort of hard to believe that Hill and I were here 10 years ago now in August with the original rezoning, and it was unanimously approved by City Council back in 2013. And a lot has changed since then. The retail, just sort of starting on the left side of the screen, the retail and the movie theater use is, I know the Commission's familiar with that, but the multifamily development toward the east is completed or nearing completion. And then you can see the subject property, which was originally zoned O&I CD. So much has changed since 2013. I don't need to go through the list of market changes, just changes in industry, work at home, remote working, and there really just is not the need for the office and institutional zone there. At the time in 2013, I think that was what was envisioned, but now clearly the RB and the commercial retail type uses are what's preferred, and it's really going to make the Barclay West even that much better. So we hope that this is viewed as an enhancement to what they have already done out there. And you can see in the middle, there's still a significant amount of O&I left. So we would contend on that side of Independence, there's more than ample office and institutional, and we don't need another 21 acres of it. Just another vantage point, you can see it's really becoming a commercial node in this area. You can see in the distance to the right, the new Harris Teeter Shopping Center, convenience store at Carolina Beach and Independence. It's largely surrounded by commercial. The Food Line Shopping Center is immediately next door, medical nursing facility across from that. And you can see that this shows that, again, it's basically surrounded by commercial, and then it really makes sense logically looking at it, and if you went back and looked at the 2013 approval, to have that piece RB, particularly now looking at it in hindsight and in the 2023 market conditions. So the current zoning shown here, and then what we would be requesting is to sort of, I would say, sort of even that up and make it RB, which is really a much better zone. And I know at the end of the day, it sort of boils down to what's a better zone, what's a better framework to develop that portion of the development, and we would contend clearly that that's RB. Let's see. I think I skipped ahead, but I know the Commission's familiar with the point. They've really done a fantastic job with what has been built to date. There's been talk about, I know there was the focus of the comments before was on car dealership. That's just one of the proposed uses. We're not, that might go there, that might not go there. I know there's been interest in that, but there's been interest in other uses that would require an RB zoning, and really that's why we're here, is to allow, again, a better commercial development there at Barclay. And they've done just such a high-quality job with the streets, the landscaping, the sidewalks, everything. And whatever goes there, we can assure you that it'll be a very high-quality development on that, what is sort of one of the remaining few parts to develop within Barclay. Again, there's already sufficient office there and opportunities for additional office. That's sort of that central area. And then the multifamily in the back of the property. And then I won't go through this in detail because I think staff's done a great job in the packet with comprehensive plan consistency, but it's the development itself from the original approval to what's being built to what we would respectfully contend is being proposed this evening it's consistent with so many things in the comprehensive plan. It's in a higher intensity area of opportunity. This is all sort of designated in the staff report, really pages 14, 15. I won't go through them in detail, but again, so many things about the comp plan are shown and illustrated here, and what they're doing, we would contend respectfully doing right at Barclay, and they want to continue to do that, and we hope that you see this request as a positive, and we appreciate staff support. We've worked extensively with staff since the general rezoning request. We have changed it to a conditional. We've eliminated a lot of uses that you wouldn't want to see out there, and we look forward to continuing to work with the city for the next 10 years and continuing with the development. So we appreciate your consideration, and we're glad to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
I bet I can think of one. Commissioner Woodruff?
I don't want to steal your thunder if you ask one. Matt, I'm still confused. In the staff recommendation, there's 13 points.
Yes, sir.
And I'm assuming you all have looked at those and no problem with that. But we just heard tonight there's another staff recommendation on this limitation of inventory parking spaces, but it's not in the 13. Typically, we make a motion, we adopt the conditions, but there seems to be one floating out there, this limitation of 50. Is that an issue?
Yes, sir, it is an issue. We certainly agree to the stated conditions, and those would appear in proposed condition number 4 in the staff's packet on page 5. All of those, we did work with staff on those to limit, and we think we've eliminated, it's a good list. We've eliminated about a dozen uses you wouldn't really want to see out there, and really there was no intent to put those out there anyway. But to assure everyone, we've taken those off of the table of proposed permitted uses. With regard to the staff comment, and staff is recommending approval, and so this comment that appears like in a different part of the staff report that talks about some concerns and possible limitation on, I guess, inventory spaces, we are not in favor of that for a few reasons. Number one, we don't think it's necessary. And if the concern, it seems like the staff is not really concerned about the use, they're concerned more about sort of managing what would happen out there. And it raises a number of concerns of how would that be enforced, for one reason? I mean, is the city going to go out there and count cars? If it was a car dealership and the car dealership gets an order of cars in and it puts them over the 50 and they have 52 cars, and then are we, do we have a parking share agreement with another part of Barclay and park them at a different part there? Because in my representation of car dealerships over the years, parking is an issue, and you'll see some car dealerships parking sort of off-site, and there's things of that nature. And my understanding of that business, it's not really predictable sometimes what your inventory is going to be or what your order is going to be. So I think from an operational standpoint, it would be hard to cap that, and it seems sort of arbitrary too, because 48 cars is okay, but 52 or 55 is not. I think the point about the parking was a great one as far as the comparison of the office building to the car dealership. The office building could have any number of cars or even more cars. We're still limited on spacing from impervious surface. We've got to have landscaping. We've got to meet all the other requirements in the code. So this idea that it's just going to be a sea of asphalt and parking, even if it was a car dealership, that's not, the code doesn't allow that. So I think the concern is that the 50 seems arbitrary. The space that we're talking about, if you eliminate the stormwater pond, which is about 8.5 acres, it's not that big of a piece of property anyway in the bigger scheme of things. So our concern was putting an arbitrary number on there. We don't think there's really a basis to do that. There's enforceability issues, and we would respectfully ask that just not be included. It's not something that we would like to agree to.
And I understand every word you said, but I'm still confused why staff just got up and said it is a condition that we were recommending. It's just not on paper.
I agree. It's not in condition 4. We agree with the conditions 1 through 13. We worked on those. I respect staff's position. We're certainly not arguing with them, but that comment sort of elsewhere in the staff report, we don't agree with that recommendation. And it is important to point out it's not in the conditions. It's not in the proposed conditions.
Well, I understand. That's why I'm confused.
It's not in there because the applicant has to agree to it for it to be in the conditions.
understand.
So I'm guessing that's why it's not in the list.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And I'm not done with parking yet. On condition
Yes.
number 10,
Yes.
I've read it a couple of times. I want to make sure I understand how it's envisioned. Off-street parking shall be located behind or to the side of buildings along internal streets. So the front of an internal street is the streets that they're mentioning, not Independence. So do you see that parking being visible from Independence, since it has to be, since it's going to be behind and to the side of the internal streets?
I think and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the intent behind that was to generally allow the parking as it's currently developed in the other parts of Barclay, which I understand has been acceptable to the city and has worked well. We certainly didn't want to have any restrictions or exclusions on the ADA spaces, and that's been sort of carved out of that proposed condition. As far as the parking visibility on Independence, I think that's addressed in condition 11 with the screening. So there has to be a low screen provided along Independence with shrubbery, a grade change, low wall, or planted berm, or combination that serves to screen surface parking from the roadway. So I think that 11 might address those concerns, Madam Chair. And I would point out that as far as the conditions, there are a lot of conditions in this. I know some of the conditional rezonings you see maybe have a few, but there's really quite a few in here, 5 through 13, that are specific, and those would all certainly be applicable, and that is to help ensure the cohesiveness of the project and architectural compatibility, again, which my clients are going to do anyway, but to have those in there, that'll give the city assurances that the remaining build-out of Barclay will be to the same high quality that you see when you drive in there today. I think the idea was to have the parking to be consistent generally with what you see at Barclay now.
Okay, yeah, and it's well screened right now. And there's a lot of conditions because we don't require a site plan with this, so. And there's a lot of questions probably because we didn't require a site
That's
plan
correct.
with this particular type of application, so.
That is correct, and I know I don't know that that's allowed now, but I believe in 2012, 2013, and this fell under, Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, it was the future land use plan designation that allowed for what we call a bubble plan. And so that's, if you look in the packet, you'll see the 2013 approval of Barclay West was what we would classify as a bubble plan with the areas and not necessarily a specific site plan. I think it's worked out really well, but you don't really see that today. Is that correct, Brian, your understanding?
It's mostly correct.
Correct-ish.
We don't call it a bubble plan, but the master planned option is an option in the current code
Okay.
for certain areas identified by the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan for areas of opportunity of high intensity and then mixed-use centers. So that option is still available. We did change the terms, so it's still there. So it's, again, we wanted to carry it over from the old code because it was successful in this situation.
Right, and there were so many different areas of designation, even on the comp plan now for this property, it's centralized, it's again, so many benefits to this property and this location, so.
Any other question? Commissioner Lennon?
So your understanding of condition 11 is requiring a landscape buffer, correct, along Independence?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the picture that's up on the screen has been up on the screen. The section between the two roundabouts, am I correct that that's a sidewalk running parallel to Independence?
Between the two roundabouts there, I believe there's a sidewalk there, yes.
And then it continues going, and I'm sorry, I don't know what direction that would be, north, I guess? North? Okay. So so cross over that access point off Independence, am I safe to assume, Mr. Chambers, that a sidewalk will be required there too?
Do you mean along the Independence frontage?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Consistent with what's on the other side?
That is correct.
And would that sidewalk be similar to what it is on the rest of the project, which is, I'll say, inside the tree line, or would it be outside the tree line?
I believe so, but I'm not 100%.
I guess my point to that is I understand the concern about seas of asphalt, but to be blunt, I'm sort of wondering who we're worried about seeing this if it were to be a car dealership. Because you're going to have the balance of that the vacant pad to the north is, I'm sorry, can you, what's the zoning on that one? I think that's still O&I. So that would be an office building. This would be some kind of regional business, and then there'd be O&I in the back.
I could scroll to another slide if that helps. We can go to the, let's see. Well, that's the current zoning now.
Yeah, there was a really neat one you had. It was an aerial. There you go.
Okay.
Okay, so that's going to be, I guess my point is if this potential use were out here on the triangle point of Shipyard and Independence, and it was a sea of new cars, I kind of get the concern, but who's actually going to see this?
Right. I think that's a very good point. Yeah, I don't know. But again, the conditions that are built into the current 2017 approval, and you can see on there's a sheet on there, it's page 8 of your packet, of all the different plan criteria and strategies. And this was on the original plan of all the different strategies that went into the original approval. And again, the idea that this was not, what was not intended and what is not constructed and will not be constructed is just your general retail strip development that you see throughout, I would say, parts of Wilmington. And the criteria that are built into the proposed approval will keep it in line with the conditions and requirements to have what you see out there with the landscaping, the sidewalks, the varied uses, the what staff would say in there, you know, in the criteria is like the pedestrian-oriented sense of place, place-making type criteria in the comp plan. And we think that this is entirely consistent with all those goals and principles that the comp plan was trying to implement with, if you look at Barclay as a whole.
Commissioner Lennon, just to circle back on your comment on the sidewalk location and the vegetation on Independence, that vegetation, if it was maintained, would satisfy that condition. The idea is that if there is vegetation there that satisfies the low screen, then it's kind of a moot point.
It's scary how much you and I think alike, because my point was if the sidewalk's on the inside of that, what's anybody going to see from Independence?
Right, and I just confirmed with the applicant, that's actually in an easement, so it wouldn't be disturbed. So if it's there in perpetuity and it's maintained as that screen, then that would satisfy that condition.
As a technical matter, but as a practical matter, it would also shield whatever development occurs within that node.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Adams?
I'll go back to one of my original questions about what would still be allowable. And my biggest question in reviewing this was, you know, the allowable uses that could still be executed, would some of them be still viewed as detrimental by either the public or, you know, from an urban planning or a regional master plan standpoint? I may be reading between the parking lines here too much, but it's pretty clear. It seems like car sales is going to be an allowed use in this RB, you know, district. So I'm just curious if I mean, again, if that is true, what prevented you from just going the specificity of a site plan?
Well, again, going back to the original Barclay approval and then moving forward, this was designated such that no site plan was required then, or we would contend now, given the designations on, again, I think what was the future land use plan maps, and then now the comprehensive land use maps. And the comp plan was passed after the original approval. Original approval was in 2013. Comp plan was passed in 2016. So that's another sort of change. But a site plan was never required for this conditional district rezoning to begin with on any of the 301 acres. A general circulation plan was approved, the areas of use, and then all the different strategies that are highlighted in your packet. Really because at the time there was no way to have a site plan for 301 acres. Much of it's largely just not developed even on this side of really the northwest side of Independence. There's been development approvals, but much of that over there is just not, I don't know that there's even a plan for it other than a general circulation pattern. But there's not been a specific identified use. There have been proposed uses that say prospective tenants or prospective users have approached the owner applicant. And from what I understand, that was really what brought this to the forefront was these were end users that would have been a great addition or, you know, potentially being considered to be an addition, but the O&I doesn't allow it. So the RB would provide more of what you would say the commercial type uses you would want to see there, neighborhood type use, sort of regional neighborhood type uses, things that I think the public would benefit from. And the car dealership, I know there's been comments, and really it's a matter of preference, but the car dealership I don't deem that to be a negative use if that were to go in there. I mean, that's a service that the public needs, as far as cars getting worked on, purchasing cars. An office building could go there, and other than supplying jobs, which is a great benefit, I don't know, there's office buildings where there's not really a standing public benefit on a day-to-day basis for the consuming public. So the car dealership, I think, is maybe, I would contend, is maybe being looked at a little bit too negatively by staff, because that could be an attraction for people coming to Barclay. And, you know, we really shouldn't have to go to Market Street for all of our automobile uses. And that's really, if you look at the trend, it seems like the car dealerships are moving more and more over there. And is that a good thing? I don't necessarily think so. All the car dealerships out on Market Street. So having a car dealership there, I don't see why that would be a negative thing. I don't think staff disagrees. They just disagree on 49 versus 51 spaces. So,
Well, I mean, again, it's just, I'm still unclear about the lack of a site plan, right? I mean, if you want to build a car dealership, why aren't we seeing a site plan with the car dealership? And this might be related question to Brian. I know that some of this is the first conditional site plan that I've seen since I've been on the commission where a site plan has not been part of the conditions. How does staff determine when or if a plan is required or not versus verbal or, written conditions?
The Land Development Code currently identifies the high-intensity areas of opportunity and the mixed-use centers as locations where a master plan such as this with limited, site plan information would be appropriate. It would not be appropriate across the city, just in those particular instances.
Commissioner Cofer?
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. I don't think that anyone on this board, from what I'm listening to, or as citizens of Wilmington, would object to changing the zoning from O and I. Personally, I agree with your statement that office and institutional, we have plenty of that in that zone, especially when you go up Shipyard towards 17th. And I do believe the Cameron Companies in the development of this Barclay has done a fabulous job. I mean, value added to all the folks that live on that side of town. But at the same time, I hear what this board's saying, and I think I'm reading between the lines on what some of the staff said, and I sense that the Cameron Companies will do the right thing, and altruism may rule the day, but profit will also weigh in. I'll just be on the record. I don't think that I would like to see a car dealership in that site. Is that my right to say so? Maybe, maybe not, but I don't like the idea of it. I think that the people that live in all that multifamily zone would appreciate and benefit from so much more than a car dealership. And Mr. Nichols, we can agree to disagree, but when you talk about placemaking and walkability and all those things the comprehensive plan describes, I don't think a car dealership fits. And I don't know, again, O and I, the rezoning to R&B, that's fine. But that's my opinion on the car dealership thing. I don't know if I'll vote for it or not. We'll see.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant right now?
So that was originally zoned O and I when, 10 years ago?
yes, sir.
So does it seem reasonable to say that if in 10 years there's not an office building on it, there's not a demand for it?
I think that's a good statement, yes, sir.
Seems kind of reasonable
Yeah.
to me. So I appreciate what's been said up here, but I sort of look at this as a rezoning with negotiated exclusions. So that's what, and I get the point, and I would agree, a site plan would be nice on a conditional rezoning, but I think the reality is this plan was conceived of probably not 10 years ago, probably 15 years ago, and put into place 10 years ago, and the market changes. So is it fair to say that your client has a wider range of potential users with it zoned RB than O and I?
Absolutely, and that's the types of uses you would see in the RB, excluding the ones that the 12 or so that we've identified, will provide just a much better framework to build out that last, it's basically 21 acres, but you can subtract out the 8.5 acres for the pond. And the level of investment in that development and the level of investment that will continue to go into that development, I hope provides some assurance to everybody that they're going to make it, it's in everyone's interest to make it as nice as they can, to protect their investment, to protect everything that's gone into what's there now. The existing tenants, the future resident, the current residents, the future residents, the area residents. So I understand the comments and concerns, but if you look at it, the reality of it is they're not going to put anything there negative. It's just not going to happen. They're not going to do anything to hurt the development.
Well, and I appreciate that. To me, I mean, the counterpoint is they could wake up tomorrow morning and sell it. So, and we don't know who might come in. So yes, I have opinions on what the current landowner might do. So I think from a standpoint of rezoning this, I think that's the way you got to look at it, as to what the uses might be. I guess, to be blunt, my concern is more, I respectfully don't have an issue with a car dealership being there, because I think if we're going to look at a mixed-use site like this and give the owner or the developer the opportunity to amend it and to adapt to current market conditions, then we got to look at the specific pieces therein, instead of making blanket statements like no car dealerships.
Right.
You know, well, where is it? Can it be seen? What would the impact of it be versus building a 40,000 square foot office tower with a consistent number of parking places?
Right.
So that's.
Yes, sir. And just to that comment, too, one of the comments, again, it's subject to all of the requirements of the code, which are extensive. It's subject to the requirements of the Barclay zoning. It would be subject to the requirements in the proposed conditions here. If there's any concerns about the property being sold, I know that has to be considered, but again, it would be sold with conditions on it. So it's not something that would be sold and then someone could do whatever they want on it. One, that wouldn't be allowed, but I don't want that to be a concern of the commission, that it's going to be somehow separated or not part of Barclay. It's part of the 301 acres. It's part of the cohesive development, and it will continue to be. It's just trying to find the best commercial uses that can help sort of finish out that part of the project and make it even better than it is today. And we think that the proposed rezoning will do that, will provide the framework for that. So at the end of the day, is it better O&I 1 or is it better RB with the conditions and the elimination of the uses? And we would respectfully contend, if that's the question before the commission, it's much better with the rezoning to RB with the conditions and the restrictions on the conditions for that property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. We'll move on to the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of item number 2? Anyone here to speak in opposition to item number 2? All right. Anyone here to speak on item number 2? All right, the public hearing is now closed. So are there any discussion on this? Commissioner Woodruff?
I started this, and I'd like to have an end to it, this thing about car dealership. I don't understand. I'd like to be supportive of staff. I completely understand Mr. Nichols' eloquent presentation, but I'm confused about staff's. And whether Mr. Harris can answer my inquiry or not, it's up to him. But, I mean, he stood here and told us that that was a recommendation of the staff for this 50 limitation on inventory. I'm assuming that it was negotiated not to be in the 13 conditions that are before us. If that's the case, then I don't have a problem with the staff's, the recommendations. It doesn't address it, but it came from the podium that it is a staff recommendation that that would be a condition. But if they're not supportive of the 13 that are there as they stand, then it seems to me there's a moot point between us. So.
I don't think there's any necessarily opposition, from what I'm hearing, to the use of the vehicle sales. We have ourselves in an interesting predicament because we don't require a site plan with this, and you followed the requirements, and I don't think there should have been an exception to that for this project. But we have normally have maximum parking on non-residential uses. And in this case, since we don't have a site plan, we don't know. And so that's probably a little bit of the root of the conversation. It's more about the parking, I think, than it is the use itself. Just the inventory parking not having a maximum like regular parking spaces. So I don't think there's any reason to hold up the project. It's in a great location and good uses. They've agreed to a lot of conditions already.
Madam Chair, I would agree. I have no reason to hold up anything. If staff wanted that condition, really wanted it, not just what we heard that they wanted, but really wanted it in the conditions, I think it should have been in there. It's not in there, so I'm taking that at face value that that's not a required condition of staff about the 50 limitation.
Okay.
Commissioner Woodruff, the conditions that are in the report are those that the applicant agreed to. We did, throughout our negotiation, talk about vehicle renting and vehicle sales. The conditions we included were the ones that we came to an agreement on. Obviously, they didn't agree on the vehicle renting and sales. We put it in the staff report just to highlight our concerns so we could have this discussion. We really wanted guidance from this commission as to what your thoughts were on that, because it was a concern. We felt it was relevant and it was important for us to share that with you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Lennon?
What you just said was great. I wish that had been said at the beginning. I'm just for the future, because that helps me, I think, big time. So thank you.
This is a very unique situation, and we're learning as we go, because we're not going to see a lot of these master plan projects like this. So we appreciate your patience with us.
And likewise. Commissioner Cofer?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in summary of some of my comments, and most appreciate Mr. Nichols' presentation. And as I mentioned, sometimes we agree to disagree. And Mr. Lennon and Mr. Woodruff's comments as well. At the end of the day, would I like to personally see it zoned from O&I to R&B? The answer is yes. But the 3 question marks under staff recommendation on page 1 and some back and forth with regards to auto sales, as Mr. Woodruff has highlighted, the way I vote may just be sending a message to the City Council to take a deeper look into this. Thank you.
What is the will of the commission on this? Sure. Applicant would like to speak?
If I may say so.
Sure.
I just want to make sure, there was I don't want to speak for staff, but there was a misprint or typo in the case summary. Under the green section, Mr. Cofer, you may have 3 question marks. That should say conditional approval. I just want to make sure that it's clear that staff is recommending conditional approval of this, because the first version of this that was made public had 3 question marks under staff recommendation.
We got a correction sheet.
We were sent
Okay.
a corrected version
Okay.
of that.
Didn't mean we read it, but we all got it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that there was no misunderstanding. Our understanding was staff's recommending
But-
approval, and there's not question marks.
Thank you for the clarification. I'm just carrying over from the last packet.
Okay, yes, sir.
Commissioner Lennon?
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion for agenda item number 2.
Wonderful.
Request approval of rezoning 3743 Independence Boulevard from O&I CD and MD 17 CD to RB CD. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington, the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. The proposed, the Planning Commission considers approval to be reasonable in the public interest because the proposed zoning would be consistent with the surrounding master plan development and would allow for a compatible mix of uses. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends approval of this request.
Including the 13 conditions.
And the 13 conditions, as indicated in our packet.
Thank you. Commissioner Lennon has moved to approve agenda item number 2. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Adams with a second. And we'll do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Commissioner Kofer with the nay. How many are there tonight? So 5-1. Thank you. All right. Thank you, and good luck with your project. Item number 3 is a street closure of a portion of Willard Street, a 66-foot wide unimproved right-of-way located west of South Front Street to its terminus with a total length of approximately 330 feet in length, consisting of 0.51 acre. And Mr. Walton is here with our staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The city has requested closure of a portion of Willard Street located west of South Front to its terminus consisting of 0.51 of an acre. This is the regional area where the project is located, adjacent to the state port and along South Front Street. These are some of the existing photos of the right-of-way itself, showing it as unimproved as well as the approaches from South Front Street. These are the adjacent properties consisting of vacant buildings, an office building, and the stuff across the street on front. This is the existing land uses and zoning map. The closure includes a 66-foot wide unimproved right-of-way with a total length of approximately 342 feet. If approved, the street closure request will add additional lot area to 4 adjacent lots. The portion of the right-of-way located to the east of South Front Street would remain open. Staff as well as CPUA have reviewed the request and found no adverse impact to services because of the closure. The survey includes a 66-foot wide utility and storm drainage easement to cover the existing utilities outlined in your case summary. The comprehensive plan calls for consideration to be given to the impacts a right-of-way closure may have on the public street network, including both vehicular and pedestrian mobility. Right-of-way closure decisions should also be made considering the city's long-term land use and transportation goals. This section of Willard Street west of South Front terminates at an active railroad right-of-way adjacent to the state port. There's no potential to extend Willard Street to the west. Closing this public right-of-way would not impair the surrounding public street network and would not adversely impact the neighboring properties. Staff recommends approval, and I'm here to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Walton. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Adams?
Jeff, the parcel that's zoned industrial that's up against the CSX tracks,
Yes.
if the public right-of-way goes away, does it no longer have access to a right-of-way?
Are you talking about the larger piece to the west of?
No, that parcel in purple.
That parcel in purple is owned by the city and will be recombined once the street closure goes through.
Okay.
I see the point, but it'll be recombined.
Commissioner Woodruff?
Yeah, just curious, with regard to that, the purple and blue, those 2 buildings, that's city property, right?
That's correct.
Where did that come from? What's the city holding on to that's?
I'll have to defer to our attorney's office to give a little bit more detail.
The city recently acquired those 2 lots as part of a settlement agreement. We haven't owned it very long.
Okay. Is that what precipitated this look at Willard Street?
I believe that was part of the reason for the street closure.
I think that's fair. Obviously, the disposition of the property is up to council, but the indications I've heard from the manager's office is the city doesn't intend to keep it and would plan to sell it.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Lennon?
So would it be sold subject to the industrial zoning?
Unless a forthcoming application comes through on rezoning the property, yes. And again, I'm not sure at this point if that's the intention or not.
Okay, so the mere recombination and adding this adjacent piece doesn't change the fact that that portion would remain industrial?
That's correct. The zoning would remain the same, just the right-of-way portion would be combined to the north and to the south of the adjacent parcels.
But to the earlier point, it's going to be a little bit landlocked, I guess. This is going to come up later tonight. This is why I'm asking the question.
Sure.
Okay.
So the 2 parcels to the north are owned by the city and would be recombined with this closure. The 2 parcels to the south, one is owned, I think it's a office use that's independently owned. And then the parcel directly, like the L-shaped, is actually owned by the state port. And so that's a larger piece. That used to be Optimus Park that the city surplused years ago. And so that is all owned by the state port now.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Walton. The city is the applicant, so there is not a second presentation. And we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item number 3? Anyone here to speak in opposition of agenda item number 3? All right, anyone here to speak on agenda item number 3? Public hearing is now closed. Do we have any discussion from the commissioners? Commissioner Kofer?
Completely irrelevant. What is the 1602 Club? What is that use? Does anybody know? The building's the 1602 Club? No? It doesn't really matter. I was just curious.
To be quite frank, I tried to look that up myself, and apparently there's some other further up the road somewhere, and it's just a picnic shelter right now. It's the only thing that's down there, I think. I think the 1602 comes from another address, and it may be part of Willard, but Willard's kind of a strange street that goes on and on.
All right, what's the will of the commission? Commissioner Woodruff?
Make a motion to, on agenda item number 3, the request to close a portion of Willard Street. I move to approve that agenda item. The request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington: Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and the Southside Small Area Plan. The Planning Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest because closing this public right-of-way would not impair the surrounding public street network and would not adversely impact neighboring properties. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends approval of this request. And are there any conditions included in this? Okay.
All right, Commissioner Woodruff has moved to approve agenda item 3. Do we have a second?
Second.
Who was that, Commissioner Adams? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Agenda item number 4 is another street closure of a portion of Martin Street, a 66-foot wide, unimproved right-of-way located west of South Front Street, right down the block, to its terminus with a total length of approximately 308 feet, consisting of .47 acres. And Mr. Walton is back here with us
Yes.
for the staff report.
This may be eerily similar, but I'll go through it.
Deja vu.
So we do have an applicant for this one. So the applicant has requested closure of a portion of Martin Street located west of South Front Street to its terminus, consisting of .47 acres, of an acre, excuse me. This is the regional area photo of the site in question. These are some of the existing conditions of the existing unimproved right-of-way. These are some of the adjacent photos of the right-of-way in question to be closed. This is the existing land uses and zoning map. The closure includes a 66-foot wide unimproved right-of-way with a total length of approximately 308 feet. If approved, the street closure will add additional lot area to 2 adjacent lots, and the remainder of the right-of-way of Martin Street east of South Third would remain open. Staff as well as CPUA have reviewed the request and found no adverse impacts. The survey does include a 15-foot wide storm drainage easement adjacent to South Front Street to cover the existing utilities outlined in the case summary. The comprehensive plan calls for consideration to be given to the impacts a right-of-way closure may have on the public street network, including both vehicular and pedestrian mobility. Right-of-way closure decisions should also be made considering the city's long-term land use and transportation goals. This section of Martin Street, west of South Front, terminates at an active railroad right-of-way adjacent to the NC Stateport property. There is no potential to extend Martin Street to the west. Closing this public right-of-way would not impair the surrounding public street network and would not adversely impact neighboring properties. The staff recommends approval of the request. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here to make a presentation as well.
Any questions for staff? Commissioner Adams?
You mentioned that this wouldn't adversely affect, I guess, either parcel. I mean, it looks like Watson's Welding is using part of that right-of-way now, so maybe the applicant might talk about how or if that has any implication.
Certainly. I think the applicant, I mean, when you do close the street, half goes to the north, half goes to the south. And, you know, who knows when the welding shop used that as their parking lot and fence. It's probably been there for a long, long time, but at this point, it's just been considered unimproved right-of-way for us.
Commissioner Lennon?
My question is for the attorney, we're just straight up giving this to them, right? Because the city can't be paid for it?
Correct. The city cannot sell right-of-way. It's not a parcel of land that the city owns in that sense. It's nothing that we could be compensated for. That's correct by statute. Does that fully answer your question?
Yeah, but at the airport, we could buy air rights, so I'm not sure. This is a bigger question,
Sure.
but I just want to point, there's no legislation that you're aware of. I mean, we're prohibited by statute from being compensated, that's my point.
That's correct. We're governed by 160A299 for these road closures. It doesn't allow us to be compensated for a road closure. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walton, and we'll invite the applicant up.
Good evening. My name is Richard Tamson. I own the property at the welding shop, 1402 South Front Street. And we have ran a welding and fabrication company there for better part of 9 years. And we have been using that property as our parking lot also to park. We have vendor relationships with the county and with the city. We repair school buses, trash trucks, trailers that haul equipment for the city and the county. And we've been using that as an overflow for many years. Otherwise, the 100-foot width that we have there gets kind of crowded with those big buses and so forth coming in there. So if we get the additional 33 feet, we may be able to improve our shop and maybe to put a metal building, a 5,000 square foot building up where our existing conglomerate of open overhead sheds keep our welders still in the elements. And that's our plans for the future if we can secure the property. We've got a good relationship with Buckeye Terminal, and they have blessed us. If we get this, then we'll have half of it, and that'll take care of at least our entrance for us there. I think it's been used by the tenants prior to us for many, many, many years. It's rock and grass, nothing for us to do but pull up there and park. Glad to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tampson. Any questions for the applicant? All righty, thank you. We will open the public hearing at this time. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item 4? Anyone here to speak in opposition to agenda item number 4? Anyone here to speak on agenda item number 4? The public hearing is now closed. Commissioners? Any discussion?
I'd make a motion to approve. Motion to approve agenda item number 4, that portion of Martin Street right-of-way closure. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington: Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, Southside Small Area Plan. The Planning Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest because closing this right-of-way would not impair the surrounding public street network and would not adversely impact neighboring properties. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends approval of this request.
Thank you. Commissioner Woodruff has moved to approve agenda item 4. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Adams? Second. And all in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries 6-0. On to agenda item number 5, which is a conditional district rezoning a portion of property containing 8.7 acres located at 2231 One Tree Hill Way from light industrial to MHCD, Manufactured Housing Conditional District, for proposed recreational vehicle campground. And where is she? There she is. Ms. Bonavac is here with our staff report. Welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners and Chairwoman. This is item 5, conditional rezoning of 2231 One Tree Hill Way, CD 15623. The site is located at the intersection of One Tree Hill Way and North 23rd Street. The site contains approximately 8.7 acres and is currently vacant and heavily wooded. This map shows the general vicinity surrounding the request. These are photos of the subject property. These are photos of the adjacent properties and land uses. The site is currently zoned light industry. This site is bordered by light industry on all sides. There are utilities to the west, commercial and offices to the east, and industrial to the south. Both the north and south also have vacant land. The applicant proposes to rezone a portion of the subject property from LI Light Industry to MHCD, Manufactured Housing Conditional District, for a recreational vehicle campground. The project would consist of 50 RV pads and 3 structures, a management office with a retail store, a bathhouse, and a maintenance shed, totaling 6,500 square feet. This is a sample photograph of the style of architecture being proposed for the structures on site. The site is located within the areas of opportunity, live, work, innovation zone, and is located within an employment and academic center. One Tree Hill Way is also a community connector. Staff believes the proposed zoning amendment is not consistent with the recommendations of the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, and that the request is not reasonable and not in the public's interest. Staff recommends denial. Should the planning board recommend approval, staff would recommend the approval be subject to the conditions listed in the case summary be applied. This concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys may have, and the applicant does have a presentation as well.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions for staff at this time? Commissioner Lennon?
Thank you. Would you mind going back to the aerial? I love the aerials. Stop, that's good, right there. So to the west, I guess one of the things that I was trying to figure out was the preservation of the city's industrial sites. And I'm trying to figure out how butting up against Smith Creek makes this a good industrial site.
Sure. So I do want to mention that the portion of property that's being included in this rezoning does not include approximately 9 acres of the wetland area, and the applicants can speak to that as well. Although it does back up into the Smithfield Creek, this area is industrial all around it, and we do have a limited amount of industrial zoned properties, and so maintaining that preservation of the industrial is important. It does not mean that they're going to utilize all of the property for industrial. Again, it is a 17-acre lot itself.
Okay.
That stood out to me, too. I went to look it up in the comp plan, and apparently only 10% of our land is industrial, so I think that must be why we're preserving. You don't see a lot of rezonings to industrial, so it's not appropriate everywhere. All right, thank you. And the applicant's here. Welcome.
Sorry, I have one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't-
Can't we see through this glass?
Absolutely.
Commissioner Adams.
In one of the land use diagrams where it talks about existing zoning,
No, I think it's this one.
yeah, this one right here. What's going on just plan east of the property where there looks to be no zoning? Is that an easement or?
That is a parking lot right there in between it. If I can go back to the aerial, if that's
Okay.
okay. You can kind of see it. So there is a portion that remains wooded between the property, and then it is their driveway.
Okay.
Were you asking about the use or about the zoning?
I mean, I guess kind of both, because there doesn't look to be any zoning overlaid in between the commercial and the office.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
To the
It's
east.
a little confusing to have both of them on the same map. The black line that you see that kind of goes along with yeah, thank you. It goes along with the creek there. That is the city zoning line. And the LI means that, and that's the boundary of the LI, so it's everywhere. And then the use is the colors.
Okay.
So,
That
yeah, it took me about a year to figure that, to really let it sink in, but it is a little confusing to have both of those on the same map. Anyone else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll welcome the applicant.
Thank you very much, and good evening. While it's top of mind, can I discuss what the staff was just discussing with you all?
Hey, it's your presentation.
Sure. So before I start that, I do want to point out, so the site east of what it looks like kind of Michigan, which is our 17.7 acres, was a previous Superfund site. The building on 23rd Street on the intersection of One Tree Hill Way, that was the old Caronit facility, and they used to dump dyes and things into a lagoon on the northern end of that eastern side. So it is currently vacant, and I'm not exactly sure what the use is of that site. So that's that distinction between ours, that sliver, and then, you know, those buildings on 23rd Street.
Thank you.
Again, thank you very much and good evening. My name is Jeff Boughton, and I'm one of the owners of the proposed RV campground at 2231 One Tree Hill Way. The subject track sits north of Screen Gem Studios. And adjacent to CFPUA's pump station. After walking the land, our team believed undoubtedly that an industrial zoning would just be a disservice to the expansive 180-degree views, and that this plan would be most appropriate. Compared to most zoning efforts, which usually call for upping the density and maximizing overall impact, this petition is a substantial downzone. Although we are certainly disappointed with the staff's recommendation, we believe that there is justification for approval for this project. Regarding site conditions and natural topography, traditional industrial land is predominantly and strategically flat. Most of the land in the Smith Creek Industrial Park fits this important criterion, sitting at a consistent 25 feet above elevation, deviating only about a foot for almost 2/3 of a mile. While the subject property borders this corridor, the elevations differ drastically. Peak elevation starts at 21 feet at One Tree Hill Way, sits on a plateau, then steeply declines to about 2 to 3 feet before entering the wetland buffers. We started this endeavor gathering all this data before creating our conceptual design. Industrial use would be infeasible without drastically altering the elevations, potentially impacting jurisdictional wetlands and the natural ecosystems of Smith Creek, and certainly removing more trees. Because of the unique topography, it's safe to assume the parcel hasn't been attractive for existing permitted uses due to extensive grading that would be required for sprawling buildings, parking, and proper vehicular circulation areas. Until now, the parcel has only been used for major utility easements and laydown yards for neighboring development. We've already worked with TRC for preliminary assessment of any potential issues with construction. To give ourselves a starting point with the conceptual design, we're presenting the maximum and the largest pads that could be accommodated in the development area. Regarding tree protection, open spaces, and waterway use, our goal is to construct our buildings, roads, and pads to emphasize the natural areas, not remove them. We will work around the landscape, altering the size, shape, and angle of the pads in an appropriate juxtaposition that creates an immersive and natural flow within the existing vegetation. This will allow us to preserve pockets of both regulated and smaller caliper trees while providing natural spaces across the entire property, unlike traditional industrial mixed-use and O&I developments. If everything is built per plan, impervious coverage is only 35% of the areas beyond the wetland line and only 30% of the total upland tract areas. I can guarantee that industrial use would require more impervious coverage than our proposed plan. We're also committed to include a dock and river walk area on the north side of the property with hopes to provide a kayak launch for visitors to explore Smith Creek. One Tree Hill Way is on the city and county's Greenway plan. Visitors can bike through Love Grove and get to the riverfront in less than 2 miles using local streets. In the opposite direction, Wrightsville Beach is a direct shot via MLK Parkway and Eastwood Road. Within the park, excellent amenities will also be available to guests. We envision working with local vendors to help stock the park sundry, a gym and exercise studio, and office space overlooking Smith Creek through expansive windows, walking trails, outdoor communal spaces, and even a pool to socialize and admire the beauty that Wilmington exemplifies.
That was your 5 minutes. Do you need a few more minutes?
Just 30 seconds, if I can.
Granted.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Regarding the infill being compatible and consistent with the existing development pattern, there is quite a mix of uses and building styles within the proximity. However, our architectural style we've selected would absolutely match with the neighborhood's character with the metal facade and contemporary look. In summary, our area is a popular vacation destination. tourism is absolutely a huge benefit to our economy. We believe that this proposal provides an excellent opportunity to expand recreational uses for our city's tourism industry and will be an asset to the overall county and immediate surrounding communities. Although perhaps not entirely consistent with the suggested overlay as a live-work innovation zone, we believe that this project will promote the objectives and goals of the overall Create Wilmington plan to keep the city a vibrant, prosperous, and diverse coastal community. We'd be happy to take any questions now. Thank you.
Commissioner Lennon?
What's the elevation?
Of the property, so, I'm not sure. Can you see the mouse? Can you see the mouse or no? Okay.
I thought you said mountains. I was like,
Can you see the mountains? So where the fence is on the front side of the property is around 21 feet. And then that plateau kind of extends to where the pond ends on the north side. And then on the right side where you see the 404 jurisdictional wetland line, which is the green line, that elevation goes from about 21 to about 4 over a 10-foot span on both sides. So it is a pretty big vein. And then from where the road is, where that tree line is up top above the asphalt on the northern side, that goes from, it gradually slopes off that plateau and then steeply goes down into the wetlands, probably over a 20, 30-foot span in the back.
so would you have the same setback requirements in terms of camera line and all that
Yes.
a residential
Yes.
development would? I guess my initial observation, if you go back to the area where you showed the rest of Smith Creek Industrial Park, one of the objections from staff was trees. Okay, yep, there you go. I see 12 trees around those existing buildings,
Correct.
maybe 20. So that one doesn't really work for me. I guess my biggest concern is, are we removing a piece of land that might have a more long-term residential use?
Residential use?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've done some research, after getting the staff's original denial, and we've actually went out and talked to these business owners, and a lot of them don't live locally in Wilmington. They're employees. They're coming in from Leland or from Castle Hayne or even north of that. And with the airport being in close proximity, and obviously we all know military touchdown, practice and increased flight patterns and flight plans with, increased terminals and a growing airport could be of concern for a long-term tenant. We don't see that as an issue with a short-term tenant. It's almost like a novelty, to someone who's staying 2 or 3 days to see a few fighter jets or that big Navy, Boeing plane that is constantly flying over that area. And looking for the live-work side of it, we did talk to a few of these business owners, and, to be honest, a big building doesn't necessarily mean that a lot of people work there or that it's, always being used. For example, the Antiques and Arts building on 1502 North 23rd Street is a 45,000 square foot building with 40,000 square foot vacant right now, and 4 full-time employees. Southern Water Conditioning, similar thing, 1717 North 23rd Street, 2 buildings have 34,000 square foot, 31,000 vacant, 5 full-time employees, and we have a laundry list of similar situations in this area. So personally, we don't see that as a huge concern, especially for this very unique piece of property.
Fair enough on the employment side. I think this is just my personal takeaway is there's an aerial you have that shows the end of the runway. Can you pull that back up, please?
Which?
It was an aerial, you could see the end of the runway.
Yeah, it might have been.
I think you're right, Ms. Wolf, thank you. Okay, well, that's pretty close.
Okay.
'Cause, basically your runway's in the top right. Be careful what you say about airplane noise too. The airport's near and dear to me, so.
I love it.
But I guess my point is, I'm trying to feel better about taking this out of the industrial inventory, which I still have a problem with, and not doing something residential there. So that's just my personal takeaway. And I don't know how many homes you think you could put there, or if it'd even be feasible that someone would want to buy or rent, to your point, since you are literally right, I believe that's runway 6. Those planes are probably at 250 to 300 feet.
Some days. Some days the traffic pattern's a little different, but.
Yeah, it depends. There's 4
depending on
runways, so it
wind
depends
and-
on which way they're going, but.
Sure. Yeah, and it is also important, I think, to note out that Duke Energy's transfer line runs pretty much through the middle of the front side of the property and extends all the way to that angled area above the CFPUA pump station verbiage across. So, from a residential perspective, people, might be turned away by big transfer lines running through their site for a long-term use.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Woodruff?
Just a couple of questions. This is strictly RVs.
Strictly RVs, less than 30-day stays.
That was going to be, and is it on-site management?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and I did want to make
Ron?
one point about when during staff conversation. The total square footage is not 6,400. I think what was calculated was 3,600 for the Welcome Center. That's actually going to be a 2-story building, so it's 3,600 square foot under roof. So that building itself, we're actually asking in the conditional rezone to be, I think it's 6,700 square feet. I'm not.
Yes, just to be clear, I'm Cindy Wolf, and I'm working with them on this. I think what Abby used was the building coverage, and the management building is 2 stories. So it's all correct on the site plan, but just, we wanted to make clear that that figure is incorrect, and we'll work it out with them before anything goes any further. But basically, the management building with the SOAR is 2 stories. And so you would add 2,400 square feet to whatever that number is that she put in the report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. Is anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item number 5? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to agenda item number 5? All right. Anyone here to speak on agenda item number 5? We did receive 2 comments from the public website. And one was kind of lukewarm and one was against, so that's going into the records. But the public hearing is now closed. Commissioners? Commissioner Kofer?
Madam Chair, I must have missed the public comment in opposition. Can you pass that to me?
I'll read it.
Thank you.
It's from Casey Clark at 1503 Stanley Street. I live in Lovegrove and think this is a terrible idea. Here are my reasons why. We already have 30-plus housing development right beside this proposal, which is already showing higher traffic than before. This does not include traffic from filming at Screen Gems, which should be considered. I find it hard to believe that this will not in some way damage the ecosystem and waterway in the nearby area, including habitat birds that are already leaving the area due to overdevelopment near the waterway. We do not need an RV park in the city limits. We have KOA and other campgrounds for a reason. This does not belong in the north side. Maybe a grocery store or another Eden Village to house our 500-plus homeless, but not another place in town to cater to tourists. And since we did get these just a few hours ago, I'll go ahead and read the second one to everyone. This one is from Catherine May at 1617 Corbett Street. Hello, I'm not necessarily opposed to an RV site here, but as an avid camper and hiker, I have concerns for the would-be campers. There are no safe biking or walking paths anywhere, and there isn't even a CAMA access to the water. If this passes, there needs to be pedestrian and cycling upgrades to the main road. I anticipate the campers will need to get to the Shell gas station down the road for supplies, and right now the only safe way to get there is by car. Once an RV is parked, it's not going anywhere. So I'm afraid there will be more pedestrian accidents. However, if this rezoning results in more bikes and crosswalks, I'm all for it. Thanks. Those were the two that came in from the website. What kind of discussion do we have on this one? Commissioner Adams?
So I don't recall such a strongly opposed stance from staff on a case in a long time. And I put a lot of faith in what staff, recommends. So that is definitely a consideration that I've been considering as I've been hearing the case tonight. I also think that whether it's highest and best future use for residential or for preserving our industrial sites, I think that there's a lot of value and consideration in that. I realize this, again, is a tourist town, but this is also a very transient, kind of development. I think the people that live in the neighborhood to the east, reading through that a TIA was not involved, I would assume all of these people are going to be towing cars. I hadn't really thought about the lack of connectivity other than car until I read the comment that came through. So, I don't know, this one's got a lot of hair on it for me.
Regarding preserving our industrial, one of the reasons we might rezone industrial is that it's not viable to build industrial there anymore, or if it's not consistent with the growth strategies map. But one of the things I looked at is the size of the property and whether it is a viable spot for industrial still, because this seems kind of small for industrial uses. Yes, Commissioner Goins.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but for industrial, they can cut down all the trees, correct?
They would be subject to the same tree ordinance as they would under this proposal.
Okay, I thought they were exempt.
I think there's there's an exception with maybe significant trees or something. We just saw that come through, you're right. Is it a Board of Adjustment?
That was for the general industry district, the IND. It would not apply to the light industry. And it would just be removing the Board of Adjustment approval for specimen trees. It would still, require mitigation and doing what could be done to protect those trees with development.
Okay. Commissioner Kofer?
Yes, thank you. Well, John, you'd asked the question about CAMA. Is Smith Creek tidally influenced? It is? Okay. Wow. Danny, a lot of times me and you are on the same page. I might be taking a different posture here because, for lack of better words, this just looks cool to me. Ecotourism, protecting that environmentally sensitive site. Yes, we have a KOA or two. I just think of the Carolina Beach State Park and the few opportunities in Wilmington that's sandwiched between a river and an ocean for this type of user to come visit. and the placemaking component. So it's exciting to me. I like it.
Commissioner Woodruff?
I think it's interesting. I don't know who's going there. I don't know, how long it's been this vacant property. I'm personally willing to give them a go, see how it goes. If it doesn't go, it won't be hard to come back and rezone light industrial, I'm sure.
Commissioner Lennon?
I apologize. I was trying to, is there actually, there's not connectivity between this and Love Grove, right?
There is a bridge right across there, yeah.
The big bridge.
Absolutely, that's what I
Gotcha.
said. You can get on a bike, if you have a bike here, go through Love Grove and local streets all the way down to the riverfront without, other than crossing Third. That's the only real large street that it's less than 2 miles down to the riverfront. But yes, there is a bridge there.
I think just to, I totally agree with Commissioner Adams that I've never seen such a red ring since we went to this system. But that being said, if I'm just being honest, I struggled to understand the basis for denial. Because the two that sort of jumped out at me were the trees and the lack of industrial land stock. That's why I asked the question on the last item, we're abandoning the right-of-way with a piece of industrial on it. So I struggle to think that a piece of vacant land, which I would say based on its proximity, oh, there's my airport. Okay, there you go. Yeah,
There's my airport.
so you're literally going to be flying right over that. I think the ability to zone that something residential is slim. I don't know what kind of footprint you could get on it for industrial. To me, this seems like a good use and frankly, a good place to put it. The fact that they're going to have on-site management. I do notice that the 50 pads made it into these conditions instead of other than the last one. The only thing I was going to add, and I apologize if I missed it, but I personally would feel better with some kind of condition that there is on-site management, just given the proximity to a neighborhood.
Are you saying 24/7 or? Because there's a store, certainly there'll be in a.
What, I guess, can we ask the applicant?
Sure, would you come forward?
So, Commissioner Woodruff, when you meant what you asked, I guess can you delve a little bit more into that? Maybe I could better answer that question for you.
Which one are we, the on-site manager?
Yeah.
I just asked if there was on-site, but John wants to know, or I want to know, how, define that. What does that mean? 24 hours on?
24 hours on call, but, management working and operating hours and maybe extended hours.
But they wouldn't actually live on-site?
No, because we want to keep everyone under the 30 days, so it's not a true manufactured housing development, per se. With it being a campground, limiting everyone to under 30 days is our approach.
Would there be an objection to a condition that specified on-site management?
No. We would be fine with, working with the city on that.
Mr. Chambers, does that pose any?
No, sir.
That's just my personal thing. I think, given the proximity to the neighborhood. Someone's taking care of it.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. If they're willing to say that, I just would feel better it being one of the conditions. That's all.
Yeah. I had a question, just probably to Brian about the conditions. If we do decide to recommend approval for rezoning, these conditions would be part of the additional conditions associated with just the site plan, right? Okay. And 1 through 6 and potentially a number 7 that's a management operational component.
Want to propose the language for that? Like as another condition 7?
Does the applicant have a suggestion of how we might word that?
I think he was a little concerned about that restriction that is a prescribed condition, that you can't have someone living there more than 30 days, but it'd be different with an employee. So yes, he would agree to the 24-hour on-site oversight, management.
And that's predominantly how a lot of RV parks are.
Into the microphone, if you don't mind, for the record. Yeah,
Sorry.
Thanks.
And yes, that is predominantly how a lot of RV parks are run. They do have employees that travel and they live in their RVs full-time, and they will, KOA does a good job of that. They will move employees from place to place for a summer, just so they're traveling with the seasons. So it's not uncommon.
But they're living on site.
Yes.
And managed.
They're living at, most likely in an RV on site, in some capacity or another, KOA will put those more permanent people in one area just so they can facilitate people checking in and out in the main park. So it wouldn't change any of the spaces, but yes, they would live there 24/7 full-time, and we would make sure that there's always someone living there.
So to what extent would you be willing to agree to a condition?
Yeah, we're willing to agree to a condition for 24/7
on-site management.
on-site management.
Trying to figure out how to say it. So if we were to say the operator shall provide on-site management 24/7,
Yeah,
That's okay.
that should be,
okay,
Thank
that
you.
should work for us.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
I agree, this is a weird one in layman's terms, and staff has to go by the book for their recommendations and base it on our previously approved plans, and so I certainly understand the recommendation of denial for an RV park in between industrial and a pump station, but the applicant has made a compelling reason, in my opinion, to make an exception to that, and it is a pretty small piece of property for industrial, for it to be a viable industrial site. So that's where I stand on it. Oh, Mr. Cofer?
I want to echo your comments, JC, just to the staff who does a fantastic job for the citizens of Wilmington, even though this has been recommended as denial. And we can all appreciate the fact of preserving the eroding light industrial. I think at the end of the day, the citizens of Wilmington could arguably be better served with this use. So always applaud everything the staff does, just agree and move a different way, at least for my vote tonight.
Thank you. All right, what is the will of the commission? Commissioner Lennon?
I'm prepared to make a motion for the approval of agenda item number 5, the request to rezone 22311 Tree Hill from light industrial to manufactured housing CD. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington: the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. Planning Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest because the proposal would allow for compatible recreational use that promotes tourism in the region. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends approval of this request with the 7 recommended conditions, with the 7th one being added as the operator shall provide on-site management 24/7.
Well done. Do we have a second to approve agenda item number 5 with the additional condition?
I got to second this one.
Commissioner Cofer with the second. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We're kind of backing up to 8 o'clock when we need to take a break for the closed caption typers. So we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll resume at 7:55. All right, welcome back. The Planning Commission is called back to order for agenda item number 6, a conditional district rezoning for property containing 2.54 acres located at 5030, 5032, and 5034 Moonlight Lane from R15 Moderate Density Single Dwelling District to R7 Medium Density Single Dwelling Conditional District for a 17-unit residential development. And Ms. Smith is here with our staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. The proposal before you this evening includes approximately 2.54 acres and is located south of Moonlight Lane, north of Holly Tree Road, and west of the signalized intersection at Pine Grove Drive. This map provides context and highlights the site location. To the right of the slide are images of the subject site's existing conditions as viewed from both Holly Tree Road as well as Moonlight Lane. This slide illustrates the existing development pattern within the vicinity, including north, south, east, and west of the site is zoned R15, containing a combination of residential, non-residential, and vacant properties. The proposal is adjacent to the city's Greenville Loop Trail, Section 1 Capital Improvement Project, which is currently under construction. The request before you this evening is to rezone the subject site from R15 Moderate Density Single Dwelling District to R7 CD Medium Density Single Dwelling Conditional District for a residential community containing 17 units. On your screen is an updated site plan which features 6 structures and would provide a variety of residential types, including 3 duplexes, 1 triplex, and 2 quadruplex structures. Lots 1 through 4 fronting Holly Tree Road would be rear-loaded units accessed off of the proposed alley. Lots 5 and 6 would be accessed off of a shared access easement. The development also preserves approximately 29.2% of the site, which exceeds the R7 district requirements of 10%. The applicant is considering 2 concepts for building architecture. One is a 3-story structure, and the other is limited to 2 stories. Either concept would be limited to a maximum height of 35 feet per the R7 district regulations. The Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan calls for new development within established neighborhoods to address the existing distinctive character of the surrounding area while allowing for transitional change and context-sensitive infill development. The proposal before you this evening results in the increase of 3 additional units compared to the maximum number of single-family homes and accessory dwelling units that could be developed under the current zoning. The proposed rezoning would also result in a decrease in both AM and PM peak hour trips from the maximum number of single-family homes and accessory dwelling units that could be developed under the current zoning. Lastly, the proposed grouping of units results in the preservation of approximately 29.2% of the site for open space. Based on the information contained in the case summary and the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, staff believes the request is reasonable and in the public interest and recommends conditional approval with the 6 conditions outlined in the case summary. That concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Do we have any questions for staff?
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam
Cofer?
Chair. Ms. Smith, just for my sake, for memory and refreshing my memory and those that are in the audience, can you explain to us just R15 as it sits, single family plus this ADU component? My understanding is the accessory dwelling unit could be rented to a non-family member. So you could have 2 families on an R15 single family lot. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Can you add a little more color to the ADU component in regards to the +3? So what they're proposing versus the differential of 3.
Sure. I have a couple of slides that might help with that. So on your screen is the dimensional standards for residential districts. Currently, the property is zoned R15 and would allow for detached single-family dwellings. Each of those single-family dwellings would be eligible for an additional accessory dwelling unit, and we would not regulate who occupies that ADU. Under the proposed R7 and the housing type, no accessory dwelling units would be allowed beyond the duplexes, triplexes, and quadruplexes that are part of the development proposal that were included in your site plan. Yes, sir.
And just to follow that question, the total would result in requested change would result in 3 more units than can be done currently, but a decrease in the traffic. So tell us a little bit more about how that was calculated.
So this is an excerpt from the case summary. It outlines the general anticipated traffic patterns as a result of the existing development. So we've broken it out if there were only 7 single-family dwellings that were part of this R15. Also, we've included those accessory dwelling units, which are going to be identified under your multifamily low-rise apartments. So that gives you an indicator. If they were to develop 7 single-family lots, your traffic would look like an AM peak hour of 7 trips and a PM peak hour of 8. Assuming the most dense potential under the existing R15, we would add in 7 accessory dwelling units, which would increase the trips approximately by 120 trips per day, in addition to the 87 that are being generated by those single-family dwellings. When you compare that to what's being proposed this evening, the 17 units is shown under the proposed R7. It does result in a net difference of 4 trips using the excluding the accessory development component and using only the single-family dwellings. There would be obviously more of a decrease in the number of trips when we calculate the potential accessory dwelling units.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lennon?
I read all of the comments that came in online, and one of the recurring themes was that there's R15 zoning up and down Holly Tree exclusively. Can you pull that aerial back up? Because keep going. Yep, there you go. Is that accurate?
So the zoning paints one picture. It is R15, the majority of Holly Tree Road, with the exception of a pocket of office and institutional at the intersection of College Road. However, there are some non-residential uses that are allowed, whether by right or through prescribed conditions, that are in the vicinity. And I would point to Holly Tree Elementary School, as well as the Cape Fear Free Will Baptist Church, which are in close proximity to this site. Additionally, there are a variety of lot sizes that exist within each of the independent neighborhoods. Taking a look at Weston Park, Old Camden, and Holly Downs, there's a variety in lot size within each of those neighborhoods, some being roughly 6,000 square feet, and others ranging up to 31,400 square foot lots. So when you're taking a look at compatibility, I would encourage you to consider more than just the zoning district that underlines, because there are other means to develop property that would still comply with R15 regulations.
What's the height restriction for R15 zoning?
35 feet.
And what's the height restriction being proposed here?
They would be capped at 35 feet as well.
Okay. And then another one, there was a comment about the posting of signs for this public hearing. Can you speak to that?
Yes, sir. I did not personally post the site, but we did have a staff member that indicates that the sign was posted per the staff report, which would have been that May 20.
I think it was the 25th, maybe?
25th. Yes, sir. And we have images that were attached to the email verifying that the sign was posted on the appropriate site.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Kiffer. Oh, Ms. Smith, sorry, I missed one.
Sorry, Nicole.
Commissioner Kiffer?
Can you just skip maybe forward in the slides 2 screens? Right there. That's what I was looking at, and I think you hit on that topic. When you look at Whitner Drive, you know, some of those lots are 3,600 square feet. And then Weston, 6,000 square feet, and most of Holly Glen Estates are 50 by 150s. Do you have any historical overview of how they're not meeting the R15, which would be 15,000 square feet? Do we know how that happened in the late 90s, early 2000s?
Sure. So I don't have the specifics, but there are alternative tools to achieve compliance. Even under the R15 zoning, you could do cluster development, which would allow for a smaller lot size with a goal of preserving additional open space due to site constraints such as wetlands or floodplain in the vicinity. So that could explain some of this. Also, there are different areas that were developed prior to annexation, so there could have been some performance residential standards that were applied to allow the development patterns that are on the ground today.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. All right, and the applicant is here for a presentation.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name's Sam Frank. I represent the owner of the land, Moonlight Lane LLC, who is also the applicant. There are a couple representatives of that owner here tonight, Ross Tomaselli and Evan Barton. Also with us this evening are our landscape architect and land planner, Josh Mahaley, and our civil engineer, Jeremy Blair. I mention this so that I'm clear that if you have questions that you think better answered by either the owner or one of the experts, please don't hesitate to interrupt me. We're pleased to bring them forward to answer those questions. You're familiar now with the location of the subject parcel. It is currently zoned R15. We're proposing to rezone it to R7 conditional. The property is currently undeveloped and vacant. There was a single-family home on it that was damaged by fire. The property is surrounded by residential uses. The goal of this development is to provide desirable infill development in an existing residential area where infrastructure is already established. As you can see, the surrounding zoning districts are indeed primarily residential. There are some R5, R7, and R10 zoning districts located nearby. Due to the historical development of this area, as you've noted already, there are several lots along Holly Tree that are much smaller than 15,000 square feet, as would be required by R15 today. The height restriction, not only for R15 and R7, but also for R5 and R10, is consistent at 35 feet. The site plan has been carefully tailored and evolved, designed to achieve exactly that type of infill development necessary to satisfy the missing middle that we feel in our city for housing. As you can see, it includes quadruplex, triplex, and duplex alternatives, all designed with structures that are intended to be harmonious with the character of single-family structures in the surrounding R15 development. Includes 17 units. There are 40 parking spaces. Current code puts a restriction on both the maximum and the minimum for the parking spaces. We fall, of course, evenly in between. There's a single point of ingress and egress to the site that's arranged to be directly across from Joy Place, as you can see from the site plan. Haven't decided yet what to do with regard to the specific height of the structures, and so At staff's request, we've provided elevations that depict both alternatives. Both would be plainly within the 35-foot height limit that's applicable to this zoning district and to the surrounding zoning districts. This image shows you the location of the site between Pine Grove Road and College Road and along Holly Tree. Again, what we're intending to depict here is to demonstrate the infill nature of the site. There are larger lots and residential communities located to the north. There are much smaller lots and higher density residential located immediately to the west and to the south. We think this site is well poised to serve as a nice transition between those different types of residential uses and also to be consistent with that general residential character of the neighborhood. It's also important that we're providing some additional housing opportunities. It's no secret that we have a need for a greater diversity of housing options in the city, and particularly have a need for homes that fit this missing middle. That is, homes that are larger than multifamily apartments, but more affordable than traditional single-family homes. Significant community engagement on this project. We've had a number of conversations with neighbors to the applicant. We had two full community meetings, one where we got initial feedback that led to a revision to the design, and a second so we could share that revised design and also solicit additional impact. The image on your screen now demonstrates some of the changes that came as a result. All of this we consider to be just a positive evolution of the plan. The total number of units was reduced from 22 to 17. Proposed zoning district was changed from MD10 to R7 to be more consistent with the other R zones in the immediate vicinity. We oriented the buildings out towards Holly Tree to create better curb appeal, increased the buffer along the rear setback, also increased the open space in the northwest corner of the development to accommodate a greater natural buffering to the existing uses.
That's your 5 minutes. You need another minute or so?
I could use two, if you do me the honor. Thank you. We have some revised conditions I need to go over.
Okay.
Thank you. And the overall change to the design reduced impervious surface, increased open space. As I mentioned, there are, you guys have talked about traffic. Nicole covered this very well. I'm not going to touch on it further. Glad to answer questions if you have them, but you've covered the fundamental concept, which is what we propose will result in less traffic than what could be built by right today. The conditions as presented in the staff report, first four are acceptable to the applicant as proposed. The last two in concept were fine with us, but on further discussion with staff, we realized that interpretation of those words justified clarification. And so with regard to the condition number 5, all of the 4 lots, all of the homes on the 4 lots that front on Holly Tree have access to the multi-use path via a sidewalk that runs along the alley. Staff encouraged us to incorporate an additional point of direct connection for those lots, and we agreed to do so between Lot 2 and Lot 3. That's not depicted on the site plan, and so the language that we've proposed here is, in addition to the shared connection depicted on the site plan, we're making a commitment to also provide that shared point of connection on the multi-use path. Subject to your recommendation of approval today, when this goes before the council, we'll incorporate that change onto the site plan. But it's important that we addressed it in verbiage here because it's not on the site plan yet. Second, there are several homes along Holly Tree, including in Weston Park, and also several of the single-family homes on Whitner there that incorporate low walls along Holly Tree. And the purpose of that is both aesthetic appeal, but also it provides a noise reduction benefit. And our neighbors at our second community meeting were kind enough to point that out, and I think an excellent point, that makes a lot of sense. And so in lieu of saying no fences, we've said that we'll only do fences up to 4 feet, that they'll be architecturally consistent and attractive for the sake of allowing for the possibility of those walls. I don't wish to speak for staff, but encourage you to consult with them about whether our proposed changes are acceptable to staff as well. We're here and interested to answer any questions you have. Thank you for honoring me with a couple extra minutes. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Questions for the applicant? Commissioner Adams?
Sam, you did provide some concept elevations, but were a little vague on what the materials are? Do you have any idea what the palette of materials for these are anticipated to be or could include?
No, and candidly, that was intentional. At this point, we've not completed architectural design, and so we provided these elevations in order to give you an idea of massing and general shape and roof slope, but feel like it would be misleading to tell you what we believe the type of shingles will be or the type of siding will be. And because we anticipate that one of the conditions may incorporate reference to the elevations that we've shared, we've been deliberate about keeping it general in terms of showing these images.
My second question was still elevation related. I guess you cleared it up a little bit when you said that you want to have flexibility to do either 2-story or 3-story, and I didn't know if that would be something that could be done uniformly across any of the buildings, or was there a rationale that you would mix the two if there was questions about change of scale? It's still not clear to me the 2 versus 3-story kind of approach to the massing.
And we struggled with that a little bit too, to be candid, Commissioner Adams. The most transparent answer I can give is that we haven't decided yet whether to build 3-story or 2-story homes. We recognize that 3-story homes are well within the height restriction that's applicable to the zoning district, and we're unwilling to accept a artificially low height restriction for this project, especially when the land that surrounds us has a height restriction that's similar to the zoning category that we've proposed. And so today, we don't know whether any of the specific buildings will be 2 stories or 3 stories.
But the height restriction is going to be the same. That won't change from, even if we rezone or not rezone tonight.
Correct. We are not asking for any
There's
increase
no height change
in
at
the
all
height restriction.
involved in this rezoning
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
request. Commissioner Lennon?
My only comment on the elevations are, I wish you had option 3, but I'm not that hung up on, the look of it, it's hard to figure it out. That being said, the site plan that you have, did I understand that that's been modified from your first go-round?
It has. Yes, sir.
Okay, in what way?
So I'm going to speak generally, and then if you'll permit me, I'm going to invite Josh Mahaley to speak more directly or more specifically. In general, we reduced the number of units from 22 to 17, adjusted the orientation of the buildings on the front along Holly Tree, and may have adjusted the location of the entryway. Let me invite Josh up here now to explain more specifically how we achieved those things.
Okay.
Good evening, Josh Mahaley, Mahaley Land Design. Mr. Lennon, Commissioner Lennon, it was mostly a result of the community meeting and a lot of the feedback that we got, and from the initial plan, we still had the road located in the same location, across from Joy Place, but we created a loop road, and we sort of turned our back to Holly Tree Road with the project. Once we had the first community meeting, we went back, we sort of evaluated what we heard, and we kind of said, okay, well, and I kind of struggled with it a little bit, actually, and then kind of figured out a way to make this thing work as a R7 project as opposed to MD10. And to do that, the biggest issue I was having with laying it out was, how do you create, because you know, when you do R7, you got to create a lot. You can't just put units, you know, in a site and not have access to some kind of frontage on a right-of-way. So I took the old plans, kind of threw them in the garbage and kind of said, well, let's just see if we can embrace the road and create these R7 lots that front out on the holly tree, create a little curb appeal, and come up with some good architecture, and let this thing sort of be lots and use the holly tree road as our means of creating lot frontage onto a right-of-way. Lots 5 and 6 are accessed via a private access easement, 30 feet wide. You're allowed up to 4 units on a private access easement, so therefore they don't need to be on a right-of-way. So that's how the plan kind of, you know, and in doing all this, we were able to sort of address some other comments and kind of highlighted here on this plan here, some of these red comments, and then sort of address some of the other things that we heard in the community meeting. So it required us to reduce the density down, which I think was a good thing, and it created a better plan. And it allowed us to really think about what these units might look like and how big they'll be, because these footprints are based on something, you know, a real footprint. Before, they were really based on kind of a guess. So that's sort of how the plan changed. We don't have that old plan. I think it's just, I mean, it's in the garbage at this point, but because it's just not worth showing you. But I think.
But you reduced the density by 5 units, if my math's right?
We were at 22 before.
Okay.
And even though,
She's going to yell at you if you don't talk into the microphone.
thank you, even though there is an additional 30-foot natural buffer beyond the property line to the north in the right-of-way that's not improved there, when we adapted the design, we moved units away from that boundary and away from the northwest corner to create a little bit more natural buffering between the larger residential lots that are located to the north and the development site.
And then just a couple related questions. This is a vacant site currently, or you said there was a home that had been damaged by fire?
That's right.
So there's no stormwater control measures in place?
Correct.
Okay. And then there was also a comment about some sort of fencing. Is that, and I guess the comment was that it had been brought up in a meeting, but it hadn't really been, I'm just curious what the resolution, if any, was for that.
Josh, what have we settled on there?
I think we agreed, correct me if I'm wrong, we agreed to provide a privacy fence along the property line at the community meeting. Am I correct?
So that'd be the northern property boundary? Sorry, I'm saying north like I know, but underneath
it
site
would-
plan, that property?
It would be the western property line, so it'd be Plan West and then the northern property line. So kind of the.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Adams?
Yeah, Josh, one of the questions I had, I mean, the multi-use path and the existing vegetation is depicted pretty clearly, and I understand where you're talking about curb appeal. The item 6 clarification talks about fences, but what else, do you know, is envisioned between that front street yard in terms of vegetation or other things between the buildings and the path?
So some of that's going to come about with code, as far as street yards that we'll have to, you know, put in there along Holly Tree. The reason for modifying the condition to, you know, is I think we envision maybe some sort of, you know, intermittent fence or something low there that you know, and I mean, staff might disagree, but I think we just don't know yet. As we get into the details of this thing, I just didn't want to limit our ability to maybe come up with something cool that could be along that frontage with Holly Tree. Obviously, we want to try and save much of the vegetation there as possible. I sort of envision these buildings sort of popping up, kind of seeing them through the trees, and there is a little bit of a grade change between the multi-use path and where these buildings will sit. I mean, on the western side of the property, there's probably 5-foot grade change. So, you know, there's kind of an embankment there. So it's, you know, the idea of, so I think there could be an option for something low. It could be either intermittent or a hedge or something like that. So I just wanted to leave some flexibility there as this thing goes down the road and we sort of figure out some of the nuts and bolts. So that's the reason for that potential modification to that.
So as a follow-up to that, the elevations in our packet don't show the actual view from Holly Tree Road. Even though that's the frontage, there'll be more vegetation along that street. So just to connect the dots there. Is that accurate?
No, I think these are front elevations.
I mean, we're not showing the street yard in the elevation.
Oh, yeah, there's no
so-
vegetation shown. There's a decent amount of vegetation, especially on the western side, and all that will be maintained. All the cars will be in the back, so we won't have to look at, vehicles and such, so.
The elevations were prepared by our architect, not by our landscape architect. But I hear what you're saying, that moving forward, it might be helpful for us to demonstrate both the massing of the structures alone and also what those structures would look like with the vegetation that exists incorporated.
Any other, did you have your hand up? Okay. Commissioner Kofer?
Mr. Frank, did you mention there's a 30-foot buffer to the north?
There is a currently unimproved paper street located to the north of this property. You can see it at the top, just underneath the word site plan there.
Okay. That's kind of confusing. Okay, so there's a 30-foot buffer there.
I want to be careful it's not a buffer in the context that we own it and we can incorporate buffer improvements into it, but it is a naturally existing area of land that is undeveloped and likely to remain that way between this property and the residential lots located to the north of it.
Do we know who owns that? Is that a unimproved city-owned?
I've not run title on it, but that's my understanding, is that it has been dedicated to the city and that it has never been improved.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Frank. And
Thank you.
Mr. Mahaley. And at this time, we will open the public hearing. And I'll give you some tips on the public hearing. I see we have a lot of folks here for it, and I have a rumor that there's a presentation. The most compelling arguments on either side will be directed toward the Planning Commission's decision. Recommendation is really based on comparing the most intense use of what is currently allowed versus the proposal, which is, has a lot of details and is what is before us. So, for example, as we talked about, the 35 feet height restriction, that it won't change if the rezoning request is approved, so that wouldn't be a compelling argument against, for example. So if that might help you tailor your comments this evening and just focus on the things that would make a difference in our decision. So we will start with anyone here who is here to speak on item number 6, in favor of item number 6. All right. Anyone here to speak in opposition of agenda item number 6?
As you come to the microphone, if you could state your name, and if you have not signed in on the back, please do so before you leave.
And as a reminder, there's a total of 10 minutes for all comments in opposition, so.
Okay.
I can give you a little more. We gave a little more time to the applicant, so I can certainly
Thank you.
offer a little more time. We'll put 15 minutes on the clock total, and we'll get started when you say.
Okay.
Give her a minute to get her to reschedule the timer. Go
Good
ahead,
evening,
thank you.
Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Wendy. I am a 30-year resident of Wilmington since the day I graduated from college, and I am a 20-year resident of Holly Downs, which is a neighborhood right on Holly Tree Road. So I'm very familiar with the area and wanted to come and speak to you tonight. Holly Downs is located diagonally from the property, right next to Old Camden, which is the neighborhood right across from the property. We appreciate your time tonight and hope that you will carefully hear our concerns of this rezoning request. A request for rezoning is a serious matter. It affects the value of the surrounding properties and changes the character of the surrounding neighborhoods. Tonight, myself, along with other residents from the neighborhoods on and near Holly Tree, would like to implore you to keep the Moonlight Landing parcel at its current zoning of R15 and deny the petition for rezoning. Here are the neighborhoods that are on Holly Tree Road. I'm sure you're familiar with all of them. We'll talk a little bit more later. Why should the City of Wilmington Planning Commission keep the Moonlight Landing parcel at its current zoning of R15? I have 5 reasons tonight. Number 1, Holly Tree Road area residents do not want the rezoning to be approved. 5 days ago, we started a petition, and our goal was 100 signatures. We got 186 signatures from people in these various neighborhoods. And I have a copy for you here. Do we have permission to bring them to you, Madam Chair?
Yeah, deliver them to the clerk.
I'll take them over here to your left.
All of the signatures are isolated to people in the neighborhoods on Holly Tree Road and also to Windsor Estates, which is right behind Holly Tree Road and behind the subject property. This is just a sample of one of the petitions. We took the addresses of all the people that signed the petitions and plotted it on a map so you could see the representation of the feeling of people that do not want this parcel rezoned. I find this quite interesting that you can see the spread. I can call out these neighborhoods. At the top, we have the cottages, and then to the right of them is Warlick Estates, and then at the top middle of the map is Windsor Estates, which is the very large lots back there, and then along the bottom to the far left is Teal Trace. Going over towards your right, we have Holly Downs, and then Old Camden. So you can see and then of course, don't forget, just to the west of the property is Weston. So you can see all the signatures that we have. It's sort of compelling that the area does not really think it's a great idea to change the zoning to a different zoning. One of the citizens actually sent an email to Nicole Smith, Jack and Ida Newton. They live on the property directly behind the subject property with either 200 or 300 feet of their property will back up to it. I know she sent this. I'm just going to bring it to your attention. I'm not sure if you were going to mention her email. Her concerns were drainage issues. The back of her lot does stand in water with heavy rain. Also, the second question was about access to the Moonlight Lane. What is going to be done with that? That's something from the past. However, it is, as we understand, still owned by the city, and the question was, will that Moonlight Lane still be owned by the city as a buffer for their lots? Or is the project going to absorb Moonlight Lane with the building? I'm not sure the width of Moonlight Lane, but it's the width of a road because that's how the fire trucks got back there back in the day. So that is a question that she had. And then the last was, would fencing be placed around the property? How high and what kind? Second reason, rezoning this property seems to be a case of spot zoning. The definition of spot zoning, according to Anderson's American Law of Zoning, was the process of singling out a small parcel of land for use classification totally different from that of the surrounding area for the benefit of the owner of such property and to the detriment of the other owners. So here's a picture of the current overview of Holly Tree Road. So if you'll see the green star on the left, that is where the Krispy Kreme donut is, College Road and Holly Tree. The green star on the right is the intersection of Pine Grove and Holly Tree. The red X is the subject property. So the light color that you see is all R15. So you can see pretty much the entire Holly Tree Road from one stoplight to the other, which is the region we're talking about, is all zoned R15. If you see previously the applicant mentioned the other properties that you see in the darker orange that are zoned R10, R7, we'll talk about those in a moment. So the side note about those properties, this is zoomed in. Again, you can see the red X is the subject property. The green star is the intersection of Pine Grove and Holly Tree. And this is a closer up view of the other properties previously mentioned that are zoned differently than the R15. So I'd like to talk about each of those. The applicant did mention that in attachment A, areas to the southeast have been rezoned to higher density districts since the property was last zoned. That was from the application. Also, I would mention they were comparing, like mentioning these, but it is beyond the light, and if you're a resident on Holly Tree Road, that's kind of a different area. Like once you go past that light, which, you feel like you're in a different area, but we'll still talk about them. The first one I have circled at the top right is the Killarney Road. If you turn down Killarney Road going in the southern direction, that is zone R5, but this is a picture of the houses there. They're single family. Look like they're mainly one story. If you go the other direction on Killarney Road, that is R10, these are single-story duplexes built in 1972. They have very large lots, and there's a bunch of them, but they are fairly spread out. So that is what that looks like. So these are very different looking so far. If you go down one more street to Ebb Tide Lane, it is zone R10, but there are duplexes. There's a picture of the first one. Doesn't look very tall, looks quite different. And then if you go down a little bit further, this one's actually R7, which is the same as the proposed rezoning. Here's a picture of what is on that lot. It is, I'm not sure what it is actually. It looks like just a house and then like a little two-story, I'm not sure, maybe an apartment. I don't know what that is, but that is the property that is zone R7, and that's what's on it. If you go on the other side of Beasley, this is Broadbill. These are R7 duplexes built in 2015, and that is what they look like. So there's two little homes in a pretty short house, and there's quite a few of them. So that is the comparison of the property that's not R15. They don't really seem to be similar to the current proposal. So back as a review of the current zoning. So it just seems the zoning request change does not fit with the current zoning. It does not seem to be prudent to place a 17-unit townhome community right in a large area of R15 and establish single-family neighborhoods. Number 3 reason. The project does not fit with the character and nature of the Holly Tree Road communities. Here is a photo of driving down Holly Tree Road. One thing that's very interesting is if you look at all the communities on Holly Tree Road, they have a lot of buffers. They're either, the houses are way set back off the road, they are buffered with tall or thick trees, they're buffered with brick walls. Many of these neighborhoods all have brick walls. It's very interesting. It's very consistent down the road. If you look, and I'll show you more pictures, there are brick walls putting a divider between Holly Tree Road. Or there can be trees and a wall. So 17 townhomes tightly placed on 2 acres, not including the retention pond, will change the feel and character of the community. The proposal of quadruplex, triplex, and duplex buildings is just not consistent with this road. So 13 of the 17 units are going to be directly facing Holly Tree Road, which is unlike anything else on this section of Holly Tree. I will note there are townhomes at the other end of Holly Tree. They are the townhomes at Holly Glen. They are townhomes, but they are zoned R15, and I think it's just because of they're kind of big and they're spread out. Here is just a picture that y'all have already seen, so it just shows the 13 units going across Holly Tree Road. So that's just kind of what it will look like. There'll be a 4-unit, 4-unit, 3-unit, and 2-unit. Now, let me go, I don't think, can you go back one slide? Okay, so you see the picture of lots 1 and 2. There are trees shown in front of the building, which makes me feel a little bit better. And then there's trees shown on half of lot 2. But other than that, that was all I saw as far as...
5 minutes.
5
There's 5 minutes remaining.
Okay. All right, so let's go back. All right, so to get to know the neighborhoods on the street, here is Old Camden. There's the brick, there's a brick sign. They also have a whole brick wall. There's one of the houses. Here is Windsor Estates behind the property. There's their sign. There's the first house. Weston, that's what those look like. Notice there's lots of brick in the area. There's Warlick Estate. This is Holly Downs West. Teal Trace, Holly Glen Townhome. So these are the townhomes on the street that are still zoned R15. They're brick and fairly large. This is the cottages at Holly Glen. Now, fourth reason, current proposal of 17 townhomes units does not comply with the guidelines proposed for the R7 zoning district. It states on page 8 of their case summary that the R7 district is intended to have a gross density of 6 units per acre. The total site is 2.54 acres. If you multiply that, you get 15 units. Also, if we look at it more liberally and cite American Legal Publishing website, they recommend 6.2 units per acre for R7. And if we use that math, 6.2 times 2.54 is 15.74 units, not 17 units. So, I mean, that's just, I don't know, I'm not a land person, but just, I don't know, that's what I saw. And finally, the fifth reason, possibly, that's why I put it last, because I'm not sure, the project may put additional pressure on the already taxed Hewlett's Creek Pump Station on Pine Grove Road. Y'all may remember back in 2013, there was 440,000 gallons of wastewater spilled during the sewer overflow back then. Oh, one more, and then the project could potentially impact nearby property values. So the people who bought this community, especially those in Old Camden, in recent years, they assumed that the street would maintain its character. And we just don't see there's a compelling reason to change the zoning on this street. You know, obviously more units yield more profits, so it seems like that could be the motivation. And, you know, we just want to kind of look at the whole picture and say, is this really the right thing to do? Miscellaneous facts about the development. As far as the setback, it's hard to tell how far these buildings were going to be placed off of Holly Tree Road, and now there's that bike path that's being built. But this corner here particularly looks, I believe that dotted line in the middle of the red circle, I think, is the 10-foot front setback, which this particular building, Lot 4, looks to be very close. The other ones are not as close to that 10-foot setback, but that seems that will be extremely close to the road. Just as a side note, these are the significant trees that will be removed. And then I think we already commented on this. The trees are only in front of this part of the project, but maybe that's not the case, but just on this drawing it appears as such. Also, the traffic estimate, which was very confusing, and I'm not going to go into much detail on this slide. However, I will say it seems very unusual how the trip generation estimates are calculated. It just doesn't make sense that you would have 17 units with people living in them that have cars and how that could be less impact than single-family homes. Now, I know that there's something about the calculation of potential accessory dwelling units where you're saying if you had a home, you could have an accessory dwelling unit, which would be more people. But in my neighborhood of 30 homes, we're R15, I know almost every neighbor, there is no one that has a garage apartment with other people living in it. Like, it is an unusual situation. So I know that the project claims to the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, which says we're going to get 60,000 more residents by 2040, and the city wants to grow inward and upward. But as far as density in this town, I will say very quickly, we are number 3 in line as far as density. If you calculate our population by the square miles in New Hanover County, we are only behind Charlotte and Raleigh. And the more we pack in, we are very soon to passing Wake County. They're at 1,353 people per square mile, and we are at 1,174 people per square mile, and that was in the 2020 census. So tonight, we would just say, please consider not rezoning this property. I think the residents have spoken with the petition, but I will say one more quick thing. Could you pull up that one last file? We sincerely hope this will not pass, but if it does, we have some additional recommendation conditions. In view
The
of
time is
conformity with adjacent neighborhood, we would recommend that they would be brick on all 4 sides. Also, we
You can leave the
would-
slide up, but your time is up.
Yep,
Sorry.
okay, and I have copies for each of you of this if you would like.
Okay, the public hearing is now closed. I've already extended the timeline by 50%, so no. But thank you for respectfully asking the question. So I just want to take a minute for the planning commissioners to be able to read the slide. Okay, discussion? Commissioner Kofer?
All right, let's light the
All right,
candle.
does the applicant want to address any of the, I skipped right over that.
sorry.
Thought you might want to address any of the comments from the public hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it, and I'll keep it brief. Well, first and foremost, R15 is a sort of a default zoning district that was used throughout the city before we knew what we wanted to use the land for. What's most critical here is that what's being proposed, the use that's being proposed, is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Wendy didn't provide her last name, but I think it's James. Is that correct, ma'am? Yeah. Just in response to some of the things that Ms. James raised this evening, the focus on the zoning category rather than the use loses the forest through the trees. As you evaluate whether or not you believe that the use that we've proposed is consistent with the comp plan and desirable for the city, please consider that in exactly that context. Second, the we've not asked the city to close Moonlight Lane. We've not asked the city to sell us Moonlight Lane. Moonlight Lane's not part of the site plan. That 30-foot wide paper street that I referred to on the north side of the project has nothing to do with our development. That was one of the questions raised by one of the emails that was submitted to you and cited in Ms. James' presentation. The applicant is absolutely willing to agree to a condition to incorporate privacy fences. That's something we've committed to do. We're going to do it, whether it's a condition or not. I don't think it's currently incorporated as a condition, but if you ask us to agree to it, we will. Third, absolutely agree that landscaping along Holly Tree is critical and will be important. That's going to be part of this design. That includes both preservation of trees that can be preserved and incorporation of additional landscaping, as Mr. Mahaley described. And finally, the signs for the entry to additional neighborhoods or nearby neighborhoods are relatively consistent and they're attractive. And the idea of incorporating a brick entry sign to this community is appealing to us. Again, I don't think that's the sort of detail you would want to get into in a condition, but if you were inclined to, we would be amenable to agreeing to it. That's all I specifically want to say in response to Ms. James' presentation, but we're also here and interested to answer any questions you might have. I'm specifically not addressing the general concern about drainage, but if you want our civil engineer to talk to you about the absence of stormwater controls on the site, the way the current drainage works based on topography, and in general what we would do in the future, we are certainly willing to provide that information.
Great. Any other questions while the applicant's up here? All right. Thank you, Mr. Frank.
Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, now it's your turn. Commissioner Kofer, you wanted to?
Okay, where to start? I certainly appreciate everybody coming out tonight, staying this late. Holly Tree, so let's think. I graduated from Hoggard High School in 1997. I was going down Holly Tree back and forth when I started driving, and was interested in the development even in high school. Now that I'm not going to tell you my age, but you know when I graduated, I look at, from a 35,000-foot view of Holly Tree, and I look at all these neighborhoods, and I keep seeing 6,000 square foot lots and 9,000 square foot lots, and in some cases 3,000 square foot lots, which is why I asked Ms. Smith earlier in the late 90s or the early 2000s, how did that zoning happen in R15? Because we all know R15 requires 15,000 square feet on your lot to build a dwelling. So I think, you know, that currently the comprehensive plan and all the policies that Wilmington is guided by, that we are guided by as planners, that have been adopted by the elected officials based on professional staff and neighborhood and constituent input, everything I see for that area and this plan seems to fit our guiding documents. I understand wholeheartedly as a fourth-generation Wilmingtonian that we don't necessarily like change, but change is in the air. I saw it in the 90s when I drove down Holly Tree. So I can't find anything compelling to say that this project doesn't fit the box that the councilmen have put in front of us. And that's how I'll end it.
Thank you, Mr. Kofer. Commissioner Lennon?
I feel old because the first time I drove down that road was 1984. So a couple things. Attorney Evans, is this spot zoning?
A judge would have to determine that. But
I knew you were gonna say that.
But I will say that spot zoning is not necessarily illegal in North Carolina, even if this was considered spot zoning. The case law that's referenced at the appellate level generally speaks to if the board that decides on a rezoning considers the comprehensive plan and considers a proposal consistent with it, that even if it's considered spot zoning by a court, that would pass judicial scrutiny, but that's all I'm going to say about it.
And the speaker's slide, if I'm not mistaken, used the words totally different, which this is a residential use, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The word detriment kept being used. So I was working with Mickey and Van Fogelman when they built Weston, and it looked different from Holly Tree than it does now. I was there right after they finished Old Camden, and it looked real different than it does now because it was 30 or 20, whatever it was, years ago, respectively, for those two properties. So I don't buy into the argument that whatever goes there has got to look exactly like what the neighborhoods look like today, because they had to cut all the trees down to construct your neighborhood when you moved in. Property values. Nobody said a word to prove anything about that, On Greenville Loop Road, Mr. Chambers, the Tombow project, was that rezoned to a higher density?
I'm not confident enough to answer that.
Oh, come on, I thought you knew everything.
Unfortunately.
Okay, so I don't know if it was or not, so I don't want to misspeak. But if those of you who know where I'm speaking of, arguably that whole stretch of Greenville Loop is all residential. And there's a townhome project right smack in the middle of it. Those townhomes are now hundreds of thousands of dollars more than they were when they were developed. Hundreds of thousands of dollars more. So I don't understand where the negative connotation about property values comes from. The townhomes, which were acknowledged down the street, I can promise you are a lot more than they were. And I guess the last thing to pick up on what Commissioner Kofer said, to be blunt, I take exception to the term, the more we pack them in. So we're here, so we're good. I don't subscribe to that. This is a fast-growing area. That means we have to build housing. Last Monday, there were 352 homes for sale in all of New Hanover County, not including the beach towns. People are moving here, and they will continue to move here. And people need places to live, and people need affordable places to live. So unless we embrace the aspects of the Land Development Code that was passed earlier this year or last year, we're not going to be able to do that. So I'm completely in favor of this project. I do think the incorporation of some brick would be nice, elevation wise, and the fencing issue I think is important. But I think the density is a necessity, and I think creating a higher density product within a residentially zoned area is not spot zoning. That's it.
Commissioner Woodruff?
On the other hand, no. Just my short tenure up here, a couple of times, this very same issue has arisen. This R15, kind of a historical R15, and people who are living in the neighborhood of R15 are against any kind of more density, R7, R10, whatever. They just want not to stop development. Everybody accepts development's going to happen, but they don't want to change from what was R15. For those of you who may know or not know, there's signs up around town about stop rezoning in Midtown. Your position here is exactly as what happened in the Forest Hills area, is currently in the South Oleander area. Some of those drives, along with this holly tree, in my opinion, are some of the most pretty drives we have in town. Nice trees and everything, and nobody's looking to wipe out all the greenery, but it's beautiful property. This dilemma of old R15 is creating the problem. I think in this case, the conception of what the developer wants is the problem. If it looked more like Old Camden, I think you would be in less issue with the owners around there. Whether you want to, whether you can, I don't know. You know, you don't have to put as many units as you're doing, but you could make the units that you are doing maybe more compatible in looks. It might ease the pain, I don't know. Density is going to be there no matter what you do. There's not that great a difference. Right now, as I see it, I think it's 7 units R15 and 17 units R7. You know, is there a compromise? Could you make them one-story brick like Old Camden right across the street? I don't know. But there is this contention of old R15, new R15, and people that just don't want a change in their neighborhood. There's no issue of transition in this one. Transition is from something that's this, something to this, and there's a middle ground. This is transition I don't see because it's all the same kind of housing, old R15. It's plopping something new into old R15 that is causing the pain. For these reasons, I'm not in favor of this project. I think a project is going to go in there some way, shape, or form, but I think it could be adjusted a little bit more to be compatible. I know some of the wording in here, I would make a quote, but it's to address the existing distinctive character of the surrounding area. the diagrams we had of the potential housing obviously is not the same as any housing that's existing in that area right now. It's plain. Whether you want to change it or not, that's up to you. I think you've done all you can to cross your T's and dot your I's, but I think that subjective attitude or subjective consideration is compatibility, both in size and in appearance. For that reason, I have a problem with this particular project as it's designed. Thank you.
Commissioner Adams?
I'm going to pull an ace on you after that. As a resident that lives close by, I could see my own house in some of the aerials, so I frequent Holly Tree a lot now, not in 1997. But, you know, so I'm very sympathetic to the concerns of all of you who came out and talked about a lot of the things that are issues for you. But I think, Chairman Lyle, when you brought up the framework for how we look at these about what is allowable in terms of number of units and ADUs, allowable height versus allowable height between the different types of zoning that we've talked about, they're not too far apart. You know, so because of that, there's a lot of really good things I like about this proposal. You know, first and foremost, I think it diversifies the housing types for the city. Yes, there is some differences to this type of housing versus what has been built in that context, but I think the architectural massing does a lot with the roof lines and the floor plans to try to break the scale down of these. That being said, the devil's going to be in the details. I mean, our commission is not in the place of dictating architectural materials or style, but I think the contextual appropriateness will be important, and I would encourage you to work with your architect and landscape architect to make sure that these are appropriate architecture for the context and for the scale of what they are. I do want to bring up one other kind of question that I had or set of issues. There were two applicant proposed amendments to conditions 5 and 6, and I actually think they're better than the original conditions. One of them had to do with having more limited access to the multi-use path as opposed to every lot. To me, that just makes common sense as balancing accessibility versus safety. And then I think the other one was about fencing and is that allowable or not along Holly Tree. Again, this is a devil in the details thing. I think something that blocks sound, blocks noise, provides a sense of layering between Holly Tree and the buildings is something that there needs to be some accommodation, but also some flexibility around. So I really like this project a lot.
Commissioner Goins?
When I first looked at this project and the comments, and I looked at the zoning, seeing that everything was R15 along Holly Tree, at first I didn't really like it, but looking into it, the surrounding neighborhoods, on Whitner Drive, you have 5-unit townhomes, which are very similar to, or larger to what's proposed on this site. And then the houses to the northwest are very dense. It might be R15, but it looks more like R10 and R7 around there. So I know changing from R15 to R7 is not something that is wanted, but it is pretty consistent with what's already there.
Thank you. We, for a lot of the reasons, and I won't repeat, the well-said reasons in favor of this plan, I'll just add one of the compelling reasons that we literally wrote the land development code for projects like this. was because our city is desperate for housing. I know you've seen the reports for people moving here. We're not going to stop people from moving here. If we don't move forward with even the minor change of adding 3 new units where there couldn't be before, if we don't move forward these types of projects, then it's going to be so unaffordable to live here that we won't be able to fill jobs at restaurants and doctor's offices. And we have to look at, for the city, and especially when you go to city council, all that is on their plate to look after our entire community. So knowing that there's really not that, contextually from our perspective and the way that we need to view this, these recommendations that we send up to city council, there really isn't a whole lot of change to density, traffic, building height, any of that. I think the biggest issue is and we talk about it all the time, there's a subjective element to maintaining the character of the neighborhood or desired character. So that's always hard to address because there is so much room for judgment in there, and no 2 projects are the same, no 2 streets are the same, and so it's hard to really put in a comp plan or a code what the prescriptions for desired character. So we do the best we can when each project comes forward. And we don't usually get into the weeds of architectural materials, but if the neighbors want it and the applicant is would like it, then we could certainly consider the brick or the fence. So would you mind coming up so we can talk a little bit more about that and put together some conditions that might make the ride smoother from here? And
Yes.
go ahead.
May I clarify that I was talking about the sign when I described the images of the brick signs?
Okay.
And our willingness to incorporate a brick sign. That's what and goodness, I'm sorry if I misspoke, but that was my intent, was to speak solely to the entrance sign.
Entrance sign, brick entrance sign.
Yes, ma'am.
And we might need to review the fences on number 6 too. What we have in there is the fences show what was brought forward by staff was that they'll be prohibited. What we've been recommended by the applicant is, or requested by the applicant is that they could be up to 4 feet, architecturally consistent with the neighborhood, with each other throughout the project. So it's architecturally consistent throughout the project, not necessarily throughout the neighborhood. I'm not judging either way, I just want to make sure you understand your.
I appreciate that, and we deliberately propose this in a way that it's within our control. That is, we can control what's done architecturally within the project, but we can't control architecturally what's done throughout the neighborhood. Now, that said, you told us you wanted us to have a brick entrance sign based on the images that Ms. James shared with us earlier this evening. I feel like that would be architecturally consistent with what's there, and I'm willing to say that specifically. But with regard to the fence, I prefer to keep it architecturally consistent throughout the project because that's something that we have control over and can perform.
Great, thanks for clarifying that.
Yes, ma'am. On the privacy fences, if you wanted to incorporate a condition that we agree to incorporate privacy fences along the northern and western boundary of the property that are consistent with applicable city code, we're amenable to such a condition.
And to include that with number 6? I think we were mostly just concerned
Trust your
about
discretion,
there along Holly Tree, so I don't know that
I beg your pardon?
I think that the concern was what's adjacent to Holly Tree versus,
We
for the
did
most
hear,
part.
we did hear both. At the community meetings, we heard our direct neighbors talk about a desire to have privacy fences along the boundary on the north side of the property, even though it abuts that paper street, and also along the west side of the property where it abuts some adjacent lots. And again, we're amenable to that.
Okay, well,
That
that'll be
might-
on the,
That might be better incorporated as an additional condition, forgive me for interrupting you, rather than incorporating it along with number 6.
okay. And it'll be on the site plan,
Yes.
so it'll be. So it sounds like we have 8 conditions. The brick entrance sign, I got number 7, and the 8 is privacy fences.
And while I'm certainly comfortable discussing those concepts with you commissioners, I guess I would want to make sure that staff is comfortable with what we're proposing as well, so that we're not in a position where we're before the council and staff for some reason is uncomfortable with what we've agreed to do here.
Okay. Ms. Smith, do you want to speak on that? Ms. Smith?
I can speak to that
did, or
if you would like.
Mr. Chambers?
Staff is fine with these changes as proposed.
Great. Thank you. That was easy.
I'll be nearby if you need me further. Thank you.
As to the jurisdiction of the planning commission to hear this matter, I believe that there's a signage requirement, and the commission should know that the signage notifying this hearing was taken down due to construction of the Greenville Trail, and when it was replaced, it was mangled, thus not meeting the signage requirement, notice requirement for this hearing. Thank you.
Attorney Evans, would you like to respond to that?
I don't have any basis on which to respond. Staff presented information that they checked and the sign had been posted. I mean, if staff wants to address it, that's fine, but
Well, everyone's here, and we had a lot of comments, and 186 people signed a petition, so I don't know that there was any, if the sign, I don't know either about the sign particularly, but whatever communication was out there, it seems to have worked. Ms. Smith, do you want to jump in there?
I was just going to confirm that we do have an email and photographs of the sign being posted on the correct parcel dated May 25th of '23, which would have been consistent with the requirement.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else? Are we ready? It's the will of the commission. Commissioner Adams.
I'd like to make a motion to approve agenda item number 6 for the rezoning of 5030, 5032, 5034 Moonlight Lane from R15 to R7 conditional district. This approval is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington: the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. The proposal will encourage a cluster development pattern and achieve open space preservation, enhancing the existing physical development pattern of the area. I believe we have some modifications to items 5 and 6 of the commission, or the conditional recommendations that we talked about. I think staff said they were amenable to that. And then an additional item 7.
The 7 was the brick entrance sign,
Yes,
and 8 was the privacy fences.
and 8 was the privacy fences.
All right. Commissioner Adams has moved to approve agenda item number 6. Do we have a second?
Second.
Goins with the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed.
And that's Commissioner Woodruff with a nay, so motion carries 5-1. Thank you, everyone. I'll give you a minute to clear out, and then we'll continue with our business.
I think the code requires us to put it up.
is to,
My microphone, I thought it had
Oh,
gone
yeah,
off.
you're
It's
back.
been in and out tonight. Commissioner Lennon, go ahead.
I guess by way of following back up, as the minutes reflected from last month, Commissioner Pollock and I met with Mr. Chambers in regards to the parking lot tree issue, and I feel like made some good progress, so just want to let everybody know that. It was very productive.
Thank you for your time spent on that. All right, any items from the staff?
Yes, and just to add on to what Commissioner Lennon mentioned, we did have a productive meeting to discuss those two items. It's our intention to try and bring that back before you at your July meeting. You know, we're still kind of ironing things out, and we're going to have an additional meeting with Commissioner Pollock and Commissioner Lennon to kind of come to a final conclusion as to something that could work. And then, we're going to try to bring that back in July. At last night's council meeting, the city council approved the rezoning on Wooster Drive between 3rd and 4th for the mixed-use development in the UMX CD. And they also approved the amendment package that was passed by this commission.
Great, thank you.
And I have two other items. One, just to let you know that the billboard amendment was actually withdrawn. It was originally appealed to the council. They did withdraw that yesterday evening. And then the last announcement I have is that, as you know, Mr. Chambers was recently promoted to the position of assistant director, leaving the position of senior planner for development review open, and I'm pleased to say you'll be seeing a lot more of Ms. Smith because she has opted to take that position and transition from comprehensive planning to the current planning and development review role. So
that's great news. Thank you both for your service.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to wish Commissioner Pollock a hasty recovery. I know he's watching.
I say he should be listening or watching if he hadn't fallen asleep already.
All right.
Quick comment from the Peanut Gallery. Brian, congratulations. I hope that's a move in the right direction for somebody who's been around. Every policy document I look at has your name on it and all these photos, and I'm like, man, this guy's been doing this for a long time. Good work, buddy.
I noted earlier that a lot of people before they spoke said, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but, so we know you know.
I appreciate that, but just be careful what you ask for.
Okay.
You didn't know about that project on Greenville.
That's right, we found something. All right.
I shared my graduation date from Hoggard. You've never told us yours from Laney.
Buck Sword 94.
All right, well, seeing no other business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Lennon with the motion to adjourn. Commissioner Woodruff with the second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed to that one? Have a good night.